Welcome to the Sunday show after dark. It makes it sound ominous. Really, it's just
Does.
This is just so much better than like a Sunday evening church service. I mean, I went to church every Sunday morning, Sunday night, Monday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night. I was there all the dang time. And Sunday night was almost always the most chill one, and fewer people showed up, and it was really hey, we didn't have anything else to do tonight. But
Yeah, my weekends back in my youth were dominated by mostly Jehovah's Witness activities. We had our weekend meeting on Saturday night at 5 p.m., which lasted from 5 to 7. And then Sunday was morning ministry going out door to door. So about noon on Sunday, that's kind of when things were like, okay, now I can enjoy the less than half my weekend that remains. So I got like memories of that, from back then. It's nice having all my weekends back now, though. It's one of the nice things about deconverting out of that religion.
yeah, although to be fair, I mean, I have a friendly acquaintance who went on a rant once at dinner against a couple of theists, and he was like, and now I can sleep in on Sundays and I can have sex whenever I want, he would just rattle off all this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, but I tend to spend my weekends doing a couple different things. I do these shows, and as you can see, most of you know that I don't hardly ever do this show in just a t-shirt, but this is my Epic Loot Exotics t-shirt. Here, I can take it way up and you guys might be able to see it.
Nice.
Anyway, Arden and I worked at Reptile Expo this weekend in Belton, Texas, and sold a handful of snakes on Saturday, had a good time, hung out with some people. And so we just got back and unloaded everything like less than or right at an hour ago. I guess we got done. Yeah, just an hour ago. So we're here. This show is the evening, the late version of our Sunday show. It's a chance for people who maybe didn't want to call in earlier or didn't get a chance to call in and to tell us what you believe and why. And in particular, we're looking for theistic claims or supernatural claims. But there's a handful of things that we're not looking for. And considering I had to deal with this with one potential caller before the show, I figured I'd go ahead and kind of just off the top of my head, rattle off some of the things we're not looking for. First of all, I'm not interested personally in presuppositionalist arguments that presuppose a God as a solution for truth or morality or anything at all. Because I find that to be cheating. So you need to present a valid and sound argument, preferably one where we accept the premises and supporting evidence for it. You don't just get to presuppose it. You're like, hey, there must be some reason true is true, and I'm just going to presuppose that God is it. Well, cool. You can do that. I don't need to presuppose a reason or suppose a reason at all for why it's true. We're also not looking for people to call in to just say, oh, I have this esoteric, weird version of God where God is the conscious drippings of the rings of Saturn, and it permeates and spreads out through the entire unit. If it's bong rip theology, I'm not that keen on it. What I'd love is for people who genuinely have a belief, especially in some of the traditional religions and traditional concepts of, gods, Christians, Hindus, Muslims, even Scientologists, although I know the Scientologists are never going to call in. They're terrified because they have one of the most bizarre and obviously new made up religions on the planet. But, for whatever reason, now, if you're a sincere believer, I haven't run across too many sincere believers who are believe because of some presuppositional argument or whatever else. But what we're looking for is, hey, I believe this and here's why. And then if it turns out we don't have anything to address in the reasons that you're giving, then we can just move on. As it's like, when we do political shows and it's like, oh, give us the reason you're voting for Trump. Well, if you're a single issue voter and you are opposed to abortion, then Trump is the right person for you to vote for. You're immoral and rather idiotic, perhaps, but that's at least consistent with the values there. But I'd love for instead of the esoteric stuff and getting fancy, can't we just get real? I mean, Eric used to believe, I used to believe, we had different beliefs. Can you imagine once upon a time with me as a predominantly Southern Baptist and you as a Jehovah's Witness, and we run across each other and we sit down and we start talking about our religious beliefs. You know what? If we don't get good enough callers to call in and actually defend what they believe, I genuinely think that Eric and I could do a better job of defending our old beliefs to each other than most of the people who try to call in. And that's kind of sad. I mean, we're atheists in part because we took this stuff seriously. It wasn't just Sunday and Easter and, hey, we feel good and we got a church community and we're surrounded by people. Like, we genuinely thought this stuff was true to the point where I was going to study and become a minister. It'd be fun to have those conversations. As always, we are queuing up callers, and thank you everybody for watching and tuning in. Theist callers are generally going to get priority. There's one kind of oh wow, that's kind of interesting. Are you ready to begin taking callers, Eric? Have you got something
Absolutely.
to add to the... Okay.
Yeah.
Then we'll try. Surah is calling from India, pronouns are him, and says that advanced alien life is godlike. Hey, Surah, how are you? You're on with Eric and Matt.
Fine. No, I may actually consider advanced alien life to be a godlike personality.
I'm not aware
Maybe
of
angel.
I'm not aware of any alien life, advanced alien life. I have no idea what it's like. How do you know that it exists, and how do you know what it's like?
Because there are so many exoplanets that are 10 times older than Earth. So it is natural that advanced life form will form, and they have so much control on science and technology.
How do you... So I have tons of questions. I don't want to just steamroll all over this, but let's say that there's 10 planets that are older than Earth. How do you know that life ever formed on any of those planets?
Because in the Goldilocks zone, naturally life will form.
That's not necessarily true. It's entirely possible to be in the Goldilocks zone and not necessarily form life, but let's assume that life formed and it was advanced. How do you know that it didn't take itself out? How do you know that it wasn't destroyed by something? How do you know that we're not the only advanced intelligent life forms in the galaxy right now, or in the universe?
No, because the universe is even our own Milky Way is very, very vast. So the probability is very high. The probability is very certain. If Earth existed then within the Milky Way, there are so many planets with this probability that alien life will form. The probability is very high.
You're not answering my question. So are you familiar with the Drake equation?
I don't know that.
Okay. The Drake equation is an attempt to approximate via calculation exactly the sort of thing you're talking about. And the Drake equation starts with, it tries to calculate the number of civilizations in, let's say, the Milky Way galaxy. And so what it takes into consideration is the average rate of star formation, the fraction of stars that have planets, the average number of planets that could potentially support life, the fraction of planets that could support life that actually develops, the fraction of planets with life that will develop into intelligent life, and then the fraction of civilizations that develop a technology that releases detectable signs of their existence, nothing at all about whether or not they're more advanced. And then that's all together with the length of time it takes for a civilization to be detected. So there could be advanced civilizations out there that we just haven't been able to detect yet. There might also not be advanced civilizations out there because maybe they blow themselves up with nuclear weapons. Maybe they are on a planet where the climate change stuff takes them out or whatever else. But you're saying there is advanced technology out there that is godlike, and I don't know how you can say that or what godlike technology would be. Like, what can they do, and how do you know what they can do?
Now, Pentagon has released that so many spacecraft flying at the speed of light are very fast.
When have we ever detected any spacecraft traveling at the speed of light?
Pentagon has released a video and admitted that a spacecraft was flying at a very high speed.
But not at
That
the
is
speed of
actually
light.
impossible.
Right?
Who released a video?
Yeah.
Pentagon.
The Pentagon released a video of something traveling at high speed.
Yes.
Okay, what's
It is
that proof?
actually they have said in news itself. They said in news in the global news channel that a spacecraft was flying at a very high speed, and it was interfering with the military people of American military exercises.
So we have lots of videos of UFOs, not alien UFOs, just truly unidentified flying objects messing with lots of other aircraft, distracting pilots. People from the ground can take videos of these things. How do you determine that any of these UFOs are aliens?
Because they were having some kind of purpose to interfere with the nuclear test.
How did you eliminate the possibility that it's man-made UFOs? Maybe experimental spacecraft or things like that?
Because such a phenomenon is not been invented by humans. Such magic.
How do you know this?
Such a sophisticated technology has not been invented by humans. So they admitted that.
So, do you think that maybe the U.S. government might have certain inventions, vehicles that the public doesn't know anything about, like top secret stuff? Possibly. I'm not saying they do, but do you think like there's a possibility there, right? You can have stuff that the public knows nothing about.
If US had this, they could have ruled the world right now.
I'm not asserting this. Well, the U.S. already rules the world in a certain sense.
There wouldn't be any China or Russia. Only US would have been the leader of the.
So, Sarah, you're making huge logical leaps here that we just simply can't accept.
Yeah.
So, going back to what you said earlier. Sorry, Matt. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead, because I was going to go back to the same thing. I think you are.
Yeah, Sarah. What you said earlier was that there's high probability that there are intelligent, advanced alien life in the galaxy, in the universe. Matt mentioned the Drake equation earlier, and I was going to bring that up too. But when you're talking about probabilities are calculated by taking a sample set of things, looking at some type of event that you want to see. And then you look at the sample set, how many times that event occurs, and then you can calculate probabilities. Let's just say whatever numbers you plug into the Drake equation, let's say it comes out to 10 million potentially habitable planets in our galaxy. How many examples of life do we have on these 10 million planets? 1. So the only probability you can possibly calculate at this point is that 1 out of 10 million planets has life on it. Until we calculate or until we discover other alien life on other planets and then somehow determine that they're intelligent, which there's ways, but once you determine that for a few more, now you can start actually really talking about real probabilities. Because right now we have not enough data, incomplete assessments about these things to even get close to talking about probabilities. You're making a huge logical leap
So
saying to yourself that, well, we have this many planets in the galaxy that are probably habitable. We have one, us, that we can look at. Therefore, logical jump to some number. We simply can't do that. We don't have the justification for it yet.
no, so Drake equation show that only Earth is possible. I don't know about Drake equation. So they ruled out that all the other exoplanets in the Goldilocks zone are
That's
is
part of the
not
Drake
feasible.
equation. So Sarah, the Drake equation, you should look it up. It's an interesting read, but part of the equation does factor in planets in the Goldilocks habitable zone of a star. You should look it up. And I'm not saying
So
you're wrong.
Drake,
Like I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying you can't use this to formulate any type of argument about alien life yet, because even if intelligent alien life does exist, we can make no assessments about their level of technology, no assessments about their objectives or their desires or their goals, or whether or not they even arrived here on Earth to mess with our airline pilots and our military pilots. Like these are all huge logical leaps that you're making that you can't justify.
okay, does the Drake equation has been certified by other scientists? I don't know about that.
It is a
Do we-
well-known equation. It is a well-known equation by taking a look at all the factors we see that took to create life on this planet. And I use create very loosely, for life to develop on this planet. Number of planets the number of types of stars in our galaxy that fit our sun or a similar star that would possibly support us if we were orbiting that star, habitable zones, number of planets around stars, other factors. You can look it all up. All the variables are listed out in the wiki on it, and you can see what each variable calculates. You can plug in the numbers yourself and dial them around and see what happens with the end result. This is all pretty well known. It's been around for quite a while.
There has been no criticism to that. I don't know because my internet is very slow, so I can't.
There's criticism just about anything in science. You should go read it up on your own. And if anything, the Drake equation is evidence in support of your idea that there's alien life out there, but it's not enough. You're going to need more than that in order to make that jump to the conclusion that aliens exist.
So what will U.S. department get if they cook up some stories, or they just they want to make some?
I can only speculate. But I mean, I can only speculate, confusing the public, giving them something to think about, and diverting their attention away from other things they want to hide. Who knows?
Yeah, the big key here, sir, is that so on some level you have this partially correct in that we have things like the Drake equation, which are attempts to figure out roughly how likely is it that an advanced civilization, even to just the state of being detectable, like producing signals that could be detected. That's what the Drake equation is going for. It doesn't tell you how advanced they are. And you cannot say, oh, because it's incredibly likely that there's life elsewhere, and if there is life elsewhere, it might have gotten to a point where there's some technology, that therefore there's necessarily advanced technology, and then further that advanced technology has visited Earth. There is insufficient evidence to conclude any of that. So you're beginning with, well, it just seems unlikely we're alone. And then you're compounding a whole bunch of assumptions to get to not only are we not alone, but there's advanced technology that has visited Earth. You don't have the evidence to reach that conclusion.
No, but the videos, U.S. government is really selling that they are divert the attention of people. What they will get? Whether they will get any money or whatever? What is their intention?
It's probably
whose
just
intention with what?
I think he's asking, what
US
does the U.S. government have? Sir, the U.S. government gets out of its programs probably, I don't know, technological superiority, secret weapons, just general dominance as a nation. Like, these are all very plausible things because we see other nations do this.
But they said they themselves are scared because of that.
No, okay.
Yeah.
Sura, I don't know what information you're getting, but the information you're getting is garbage. The U.S. government is not releasing information about aliens and saying they're scared or we're scared of it. That's just not happening. What's happening is there are people who believe in aliens who are spreading misinformation, and we have insufficient evidence. But this is also something, sir, that doesn't matter at all. You have no way of demonstrating that there's advanced technology. You've just bought into something and run with it, and it still doesn't get you to God. So
Okay, what
I think
about
we're going to
that
have to move. I think we're going to have
Phoenix?
to move on. I think we're going to have to move
Okay,
on.
just one question. One question. What about Phoenix, Arizona, where many people have seen Phoenix, Arizona UFO thing?
There,
Where it was a
holy shit, Sarah. Now you're going to ask me to debunk a vague claim that there's a bunch of people in an area who claim to have seen something. I don't fucking care. There's a bunch of people who claim to see things and experience things regularly that are not true, and that isn't enough information. So you don't get to say, yeah, but people in Phoenix think they saw it. Okay. So what? That's not sufficient evidence to conclude that anything you've said is remotely correct.
you mean they have seen something else? You're saying that they have seen some
I don't know
aeroplane.
what they've seen. I don't know what they've seen because I haven't spoken to them and I haven't investigated this. You know why? Because it's not worth my time to speak to them and investigate it. Because if in fact what they were saying was real and reliable, somebody would have already investigated and come up with more evidence than merely saying, hey, there's some people in Phoenix who think they saw something. Cool. All right. Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That topic is something that really does fascinate me because like I do have an emotional desire for there to be aliens discovered, especially intelligent alien life. Like I want to see that happen, but I'm not letting my emotional desires get in the way of a robust epistemology in order to get to that conclusion. I don't want my emotions to cloud my judgments about those things. So yeah, Sura, I want there to be alien life. I want them to have visited us. I want these things to be true, but I don't have evidence that they actually are, at least nothing that can indicate more likely than not that it's true. And if you are interested in these things, you say you didn't know about the Drake equation, you can look up certain, well, there's plenty of wiki articles, but certain YouTube channels that I really like about this type of topic. John Michael Godier, Isaac Arthur, PBS Space Time. There's stuff on the James Webb Space Telescope because that's geared to detect certain traces of both artificial and non-artificial life. I'm sorry, non-artificial life. I'm sorry, intelligent and non-intelligent life. Like we have the tools and we're performing these searches, and it's fascinating stuff. The Drake equation, Fermi's paradox, things about the Great Filter, like fascinating stuff. By all means, look into it, like read up on it, but curb your enthusiasm to jump those gaps to go to conclusions that you want to see because it's just like the Drake equation. There's actually quite a parallel here. The Drake equation, it lines up a bunch of variables and multiplies them together. The probability of a planet being around a star the probability of the star being the right type of star, the probability that a planet is in that Goldilocks zone. You're multiplying these probabilities, these percentages together. And the more percentages, as long as they're below 100, the more you multiply together, the smaller and smaller your result becomes. So that's how the Drake equation works. Sura, you're taking all these logical leaps that have like these small percentages of actually being true, that intelligent aliens actually exist, intelligent aliens actually visit the planet, intelligent aliens this and that and this and that. And you don't realize how small the probability, the percentage value is of that actually being true at the end there is because you're multiplying all these low percentages together. It's just basic math. Same thing that happened in the Drake equation. The reason the Drake equation is impressive is because we have so many stars that number is still fairly large, even though, relatively speaking, it's small compared to the number of stars we have. Anyway, I love that kind of stuff. I could talk about it for hours. But yeah, go check it out. Read up on it and curb your enthusiasm a little bit.
It's a strange thing because, I can see where somebody's like, hey, and I'm in agreement. The universe is a really big place. And to kind of paraphrase Carl Sagan, it would be really surprising to find that we were the only intelligent life that had ever evolved. Yep. But there's other issues, which is maybe we're the first, maybe we're the only, maybe others came before us and died out. Maybe others life evolved many, many times, but for whatever reason, they didn't reach, a technological stage to reach out. The big thing is we don't know, and we can keep exploring. But the problem in part is that the vast distances in space and the fact that it appears that faster than light travel isn't possible suggest that it's incredibly unlikely that we've been visited. Not the least of which is we're an unremarkable planet in an unremarkable solar system in an unremarkable area of our galaxy, which is unremarkable amongst the billions and billions and billions of galaxies that are out there. And so you're kind of like multiplying likelihoods. And as Eric was saying, it's just going to keep getting smaller and smaller. But it would be cool. And the nice thing is if there was an advanced technology or a technologically advanced alien race out there that had visited Earth, it'd be cool if in fact there was good evidence for it. Yep. But instead what we have are, I saw a weird light, or this appears to not be right, or I was abducted and they looked like this, and then somebody else said they were abducted. And it's weird to look at the descriptions of aliens that once upon a time looked very much like robots and stuff out of science fiction, and then after Close Encounters of the Third Kind, all of a sudden, almond eyes, big gray-headed aliens become the ones that are more commonly claimed. So as soon as something enters pop culture, all of a sudden it becomes the one that people are seeing. People aren't seeing hairy Yeti aliens stepping off of a ship, and they're not seeing, spacemen in suits and, like we're in Back to the Future and playing Van Halen for somebody.
Yeah, it's amazing how our culture can prime us to see things that align with those things in culture. Like you mentioned, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. All of a sudden, when an idea has been put into the public consciousness, you start seeing those things.
Cool.
Yeah, not good evidence, though.
All right, we got our next theist caller is Jacob in Tennessee. Pronouns are he, him. Jacob says the Bible supports the binary notion of sex as the truth. And so I guess my question is, Jacob, since I am not a follower of the Bible, why should any of us care if you think the Bible supports a binary notion of sex, or even if it actually does? That doesn't impact any of us. I mean, the Bible supports all kinds of things that I don't accept.
Sure. I mean, we could take it to the scientific route. If you don't want to reference the Bible, I'll say
I'm saying you called in.
Use the Bible.
Jacob, you called in to say the Bible supports the binary notion of sex. My question is, why should I care what the Bible says?
Because it's congruent with science.
Well, actually, the Bible's not congruent with science, but the notion that sex
on
is
that topic.
merely hang on. No. You don't get to just say, on this topic, it's congruent with science. First of all, it's not. But second of all, even if it were congruent with science on one issue, doesn't tell you whether or not it's congruent with science on any other issue. And it doesn't tell you whether or not it's true. So the Bible is irrelevant to truth. You need arguments supported by evidence that show that something's consistent with reality. But this show is about people calling in to defend what they believe about God and why. So if, I don't see where sex is relevant to any discussion we're likely to have today.
What's in the zeitgeist? It's a huge thing that's in the, in the public sphere nowadays that people talk about. So that's why I thought it'd be relevant to call in and maybe discuss it a little bit.
Yeah, but as I just explained, you're supposed to be calling in to defend a God concept, not if you want to call in and talk about gender, you should maybe call a different show. Like you have over and over and over, including the other night when you called in and lied and said you wanted to talk about Trump's healthcare and you weren't going to talk about this. And then Jimmy ended up shutting you down. And guess who's going to shut you down today? Jacob.
I did talk about Trump's healthcare.
Guess who's going to shut you down today?
I'm guessing you, Matt.
Yeah. So why don't you call in and actually
I just want to have a conversation.
Shut up. Why don't you call in and actually defend your God belief instead of calling in about your pet issue that you're monumentally wrong about and just an ignorant bigot?
I'm an agnostic atheist. And
No,
reading
sir.
new
It
current
says here.
scientific
It
literature,
says here,
does it make
Jacob.
you a
It
bigot,
says
Matt?
here. I'm going to mute you. It says here that you're a theist, not an agnostic atheist, and you've called in many other times. So, are you a theist or are you an agnostic atheist?
I'm a bit on the fence, to be honest with you. I go back and forth.
Well, cool. Go back and sit on that fence some more. And as the pickets on that fence go right up your ass, when you figure out that you are a theist, you can call in and defend theism. But I have zero interest in spending time with an agnostic atheist who doesn't understand the basics of sex and gender and keeps calling in to get it wrong and support bigotry on the wrong shows when he could call in.
I'm
on
just
some
trying to
other
have a
show.
conversation.
I'm
just want to have
sorry.
a conversation. Nobody wants.
Here, I'm going to mute you. You're not going to have a conversation. This is not the show where you get to call in and have a conversation on whatever fucking issue you want. I don't know how many ways I can explain it to you. Call the Transatlantic Call-In Show. Call a show that's doing this as a topic, but fuck the fuck off from this show where we're not doing that. Is that clear enough for you? Do you get that?
Can I ask you why reading current scientific literature makes me a bigot?
Okay, I hung up on you because I asked you a question about whether or not it makes sense, and you decided to be a little dickhead, and say, can I ask you a question about why I'm reading scientific literature? The fact of the matter is you're not reading the scientific literature, because the truth is that biological sex, which is often tied to chromosomes, is not binary. There aren't just XX and XY. You are simply wrong. You've been listening to Richard Dawkins or somebody else who oversimplifies things. So your preschool, kindergarten understanding of sex can make you feel comfortable. But in reality, the chromosomes are much more complicated than that, as are secondary sexual characteristics. And when we're talking about gender, we're not talking about sex in the straight chromosomal sense. We're talking about the intersection between biology, psychology, and sociology. And gender is a social construct there. So you're unable to even have a conversation about the subject at hand because you need to reframe things in terms of a biological sex, which you're still wrong about. And then you seem to go back and forth between being a theist, calling in to tell us that the Bible supports binary sex, which we don't give a fuck about. My give a fucks about the Bible are not just on vacation. They have left the building in a permanent sense until somebody gives me a reason to care what the Bible says. Okay? So here we are, and you just wasted time to call in and keep doing it. You're going to keep giving us clip content, and you're going to make zero progress at all towards your eventual goal. If you want to have a discussion about gender, we have an entire show for that. If you'd like to have a debate about gender, you can go to our website and you can request that debate. But you don't get to call into the Sunday show, pretend or claim that you're a theist, and then instead of defending your God belief, start doing the same ignorant bigotry that you've been engaged with over and over and over and over again every time we've shut you down. Grow up, Jacob. Stay with the focus of the show. Call in and have those conversations. But in the meantime, bye. I don't know how many times we can explain it.
Even if we wanted to entertain the conversation, the Bible, if the goal was to talk about any topic from a scientific standpoint, the Bible is irrelevant to that conversation. The Bible has thoroughly disqualified itself from being considered for those things, because any scientific truths that we have accepted, the Bible does not add to that evidence. The Bible are a bunch of claims. There's true claims and false claims in there. Anything that the Bible might line up with from a scientific sense is coincidental, because we have lots of evidence where the Bible does not line up with our scientific discoveries, like the earth being 6,000 years old, there being a global flood, lots of different, things like that. So we know with any scientific discovery, we rely on just the science and just the scientific evidence. We don't even need the Bible in such a discussion. Now, if the Bible was lining up with science left and right, and we were like, wow, we can't seem to find any strike against the Bible, you might have more of a case there to talk about that in a conversation like this. But right now, the Bible is just 50-50, in my opinion, right and wrong. To me, is just random chance. So, like, who cares? Who cares about what the Bible says about that? Let's talk about science instead.
It's really kind of weird. I mean, here we are, and we're providing theists the opportunity to call in and explain why they believe and perhaps why other people should believe. And then we get a parade of, confused bigots who just want to have a conversation. Okay. I get paid to have conversations. I get paid to have debates. I'd be happy to do either one, but you don't have to pay me. You can just go to the website and say, I'd like to debate someone on gender issues. But here's the biggest problem for Jacob is that Jacob can't be honest. And even when we try to eke some honesty out, he can't be honest about whether or not he's a theist or an atheist. He's sitting on the fence, but he calls in to say the Bible says something that as if we would care about the Bible. It's such ridiculous. It's a waste of everybody's time. And I think it's pathetic that there aren't Christians and Muslims and Jews calling in to defend the God they believe in. And instead, they continue to allow these reprobate douche nozzles who couldn't argue their way out of a wet paper bag to be the primary examples of their religion to the public. Why would you do that? I just don't get it. But we got a couple other callers here. Is it Mester or Meester? Hello?
Hi.
Is it Mester or Meester?
Nestor.
Hey, Mester. Mester's an atheist. Pronouns are he, him. You're in a situation and you wanted some advice. So tell us what's going on.
Yeah. So pretty much I work at a store and it's predominantly like Christian, and like all the customers, most of them are Christians, and sometimes they like come up to me and ask me like, what church do you go to? And I always say, like, oh, Catholic or whatever, because that's what I was raised on. But I'm not sure if I should like keep saying that or if I should just be honest. Like, I don't know if they would be different to me particularly, but I'm just not sure. Like, I feel like they wouldn't be as open to it,
Are you worried about like do your bosses, are they one of the concerns?
Well, yeah, and just simply like I am not sure if deceiving, like saying that I am a particular religion or that I go to church, whatever, just to fit in. I don't know if that's like acceptable, I guess.
So I can tell you, here's a weird, I can't tell you what's going to be best for you. I can tell you that, first of all, I wouldn't work there. But if I were in some circumstance where I actually was working there, then if somebody came up to me and said, hey, where do you go to church? I'd say, I don't talk about that. And then you're telling the truth because you're not going to talk about it. You're not necessarily being rude and saying, oh, that's none of your business, or that's personal, or, anything. I don't talk about that. You can say it's personal. I don't talk about it. If they push, they're the asshole. And that goes for everybody. I mean, as a matter of law, if they're, public business, they can't hold it against you. And if the customers are in there, it would actually be the smartest thing for your boss to do. If he owns, like if you're working at some Christian bookstore, let's say, and you have Christians coming in primarily as customers, the smartest thing your boss could do would be to have a policy where nobody there talks about where they go to church. because you're in this position where if you don't go to the church that some customer thinks you should go to, they might judge you, and they could judge the business.
Right.
Or if you get, there are Protestants, there are Catholics, there are Baptists, there are Lutherans. We don't want to get into denominational squabbles here. And so the best thing you could do would just to say, we're not going to do that. But if I were in your position, it would just be, I don't talk about that.
And if they push you on the matter too, you can always pull out the "that's between me and God" card. We know you're an atheist and you don't believe in a God, but that will put them in a position of having to insert themselves between you and a relationship with a supposed God, and that should go against their core Christian values. If they continue to push, then that's a completely different thing. That might open up some other objections you can bring up.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, but just pull the "that's between me and God" card. That's what I would do. Like that's what I recommend with certain people, especially with ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. Whenever they're trying to leave the congregation, trying to fade, get out of the religion, but they're doing it quietly and gradually. If an elder or somebody in charge kind of gets wise to it and tries to, question them, you can just bring that up and say, "That's between me and Jehovah. It's between me and God. I don't want to answer that because that's a personal matter." And yeah, just put up those things and hopefully things smooth out. And I agree with Matt. It would be wise for your boss, your company, to have policies in place to discourage talk of religion and other things in the environment, because businesses should be for business related stuff. And if they don't, then establish that as your own personal policy and tell others, "Hey, I make it a matter of policy not to talk about this because I want to keep it professional here." So yeah, it can be difficult to navigate, especially if certain businesses are Christian owned and operated, and they're going to really want to kind of have those conversations with you and influence you, and in some cases make sure you're voting the quote unquote right way. And yeah, you gotta put up those healthy barriers and stick with them, tactfully, of course, because you probably want to keep your job. And if you get fired because you don't want to talk about it, then it's terrible. Maybe grounds for a lawsuit if you can get evidence of it. But yeah, it's like it's difficult. There's no way around that. It's a difficult situation to be in.
All right. Well, thank you so much for the advice. I will definitely put it into practice.
All right.
Cool.
Good luck.
And if you get fired, it's not our fault.
Don't blame me. Actually, last thing about that last part. If it ever does, this is just general instructions or suggestions for anyone. Any conversations around this, try to get an email or some type of text form, electronic communication, because that leaves a record. And if you ever are falsely fired because you just don't want to talk about religion, but let's say your boss is like, "Oh, I can't have you work here if you're not going to talk about your religion with me," that's a violation of, if you're in Texas, is a violation of your civil rights. There's non-discriminatory laws on the federal level. If you have an electronic record of those things, you can then take that and go to certain authorities, and they can sanction the business. They can do all kinds of stuff to teach them a lesson, get you some compensation in return. And it sets a good precedent for other people in the future, because they see that, hey, this behavior for business owners, this behavior leads to these negative consequences. That'll deter them from doing that in the future. And it also encourage others experiencing that same abuse or that same mistreatment of the workforce to take action and to correct the situation. So any dialogue around this that might get serious, have it be in text form, and you can hold on to that and show it to authorities if you need to.
All right. Yeah. Thank you so much for the advice.
All right. Cool. Good luck, man.
Thank you.
Right. So it might be a little early. I mean, we've only been live for about 45 minutes. It's probably too early to claim victory, but I noticed that, like, the only theists we've had call in aren't really providing a defense for their religion. One of them tried to argue that there's advanced technology, with godlike technology with aliens, which doesn't get you anywhere to a god, even if there was. I don't even know what godlike technology is. And the other one just wanted to talk about chromosomes and demonstrate their incredible misunderstanding of both the subject of the show, the subject that they wanted to talk about. It's like they didn't understand anything. So I guess I guess there are no good evidence-based defenses of any religion out there. There's only people who want to presuppose God as an answer for something that they haven't even demonstrated as a problem that could be solved, or that a God would in any way solve it, or people who want to parade their bigotry around, or suggest that there's aliens. I had a long weekend. I worked at Reptile Expo. If we're not going to get the theist calls, I guess I could just go to bed. But we'll see. We'll see if anybody can give a good reason why any of us should believe in a God. But for now, we've got Joe in Australia, pronouns are they, them, has a question about something I barely know anything about. So this will be fun.
Hi.
Hi.
In the past, you have had, with the fine-tuning argument, you mentioned a saying that how do we know that this is the only way that life is possible, or something along those lines.
It doesn't sound like me.
I might. Okay.
So if you could, while you're thinking about this, if you can kind of move your head a little further away from the microphone and maybe speak a little softer, you're kind of peaking the mic a bit. But instead of trying to do the, hey, you said something like this one time, let's see if we can just sort out what Eric's position is, what my position is, and what it is that you're kind of needing assistance with.
Okay. Yep. What are your positions on the fine-tuning argument then? Is that what you want me to ask, or just positions on the topic I'm brought up?
Well, it was whatever you were having difficulty with, because it said here that you want to make sure you understood the inevitability argument against fine-tuning, and the only thing that I really know is that I think Hawking argued that our universe may in fact, or that the facets that provide or the things that we would appear to be fine-tuned are in fact inevitable, because the universe sort of selects for those things that lead towards life. I don't know that I buy that. I don't know that it's a good rebuttal. I don't know how you could demonstrate that it is in fact inevitable. My take on the fine-tuning argument is that there's no demonstration that any tuning has occurred. At most, it just suggests, hey, life seems really unlikely. All of these things have to be thus and so, and we can just assume that an intelligence like tweaked those dials. But there's no demonstration that any of those could have been any other way. It's maybe this is the only possible way a universe could be, or it might be the case that if the universe were different, there would be some other type of life sitting in that universe saying, gosh, it's incredibly unlikely that the settings were tuned just for us. And so if there were a billion different ways that the universe could produce a billion different types of life, then there's nothing particularly fine-tuned about this one. It's just the one that we happen to get. And since we only have one universe to investigate or explore, I don't know how you would ever demonstrate what the likelihood of the particular constants are. The only thing you can do is just try to do it in your head by imagining other universes and doing computer simulations of what they might look like. But I've seen no demonstration that anything could have been otherwise. And I've seen no demonstration that if things had been otherwise, something else wouldn't have evolved. Now, I wouldn't be here. I'm contingent on this specific chain of events that led to me. But life in the abstract may not be contingent on anything so narrow.
Okay.
And Go ahead,
Sorry,
Joe.
you go.
No, please go ahead.
So that argument that you made about how it's how do you know that it's even possible for it to be any other way? That's the argument that I was trying to reference that you said
Okay,
in the past.
cool. Because in the summary, it said that you were talking about the inevitability argument against fine tuning, and I don't know that there's much of an argument there, the Hawking one. So I was like, let me just mention that. But if you're talking about what I've said, that the universe is a certain way, how do you know that it could have been otherwise? It's not an argument that it was inevitable. It's a pointing out, how do you show that the particular constants that you think have been fine-tuned could have been any other way? And I don't know how they can demonstrate that.
Yep. So that's on me for misunderstanding the argument that you were presenting in the past. So I apologize for that.
Yeah, no worries. No, I'm glad we got it cleared up. Eric, I think you had thoughts on here to jump in.
I mean, I just had a little bit of just additional stuff to put on to what you mentioned. Yeah, unfortunately, we only have this one universe to examine. We can only hypothesize about, multiverses or things like an infinite series of big bangs and big crunches. And every time you have a cycle or an iteration, the values are different. And inevitably, the value is going to line up to support some type of life. I noticed that a lot of fine-tuning arguments tend to presuppose that or assume that our form of life is the only viable one, the only possible one, our configuration, everything. And we don't necessarily know that. We don't know what other forms life could take, or even if, life can be to various degrees or other forms. There's so many assumptions there that to me, it's just a big wash. Like, I just like in order to refute it, you need to basically make the same types of logical leaps in order to accept it. So it's fascinating to talk about. And it's there needs thought experiments, but I don't know. We could be one of infinite number of iterations, and this iteration hit the right values, and now here we are to complain about it. And in an iteration that didn't have it, nobody's around to complain about it. So it's like, yeah. So it's just a big wash to me, and I don't really worry too much about it. Now, if you really want to talk to somebody about it, I do recommend maybe going on to a few other channels. I kind of explore it more deeply, because I'm very much not versed in the inevitability rebuttal to the fine-tuning argument. I did find a Reddit article while you guys were speaking earlier, and this gentleman was talking about how he doesn't see it as a good rebuttal because it has to make those same types of assumptions. But you might find something else elsewhere that might be helpful. Keep thinking about it, though.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I'm just going to try and reword what Matt has said in an attempt to work out if I'm understanding the argument correctly, if that's okay.
Sure. Just try and move a little further from the mic or speak a little more quietly. We're still peaking a bit.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. So for fine-tuning to have occurred, there has to have been a choice, and because we only have one example of the universe, therefore no choice from in terms of evidence, we have no evidence that was a choice was made, because it could just be, essentially, this might be the only way to make a universe, and so there's no design without choice. So if it's the only way to make a universe, then there's no design of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's entirely possible that there could be a God that intentionally created this universe, but if this was the only universe they could have made, then yes, there was still no choice. The only choice was to make, not what to make. But if you imagine, for example, we don't have the ability to explore any other universe, and we don't have the ability to explore our universe beyond, for example, the Planck time is we can't really go back prior to that. But if you tried to create some hypotheticals about how could a universe like this come to be? Well, it was the creation, but there was no choice. It was imagine, for example, that there's a multiversal universe generator, and it just keeps popping up universes, and the overwhelming majority of them have some physical constant. Maybe the strong nuclear force is just a little bit off, and because of that, you can't get the sort of bonds that you need to produce anything, and so they just implode immediately. And you go through all the possible variations, and you start tweaking dials, and then you find, well, hang on, only this narrow thing produces life like us. Maybe only one thing produces life like us. But then you have to ask the question, why are we talking about life like us? If a different universe arose, maybe there's a different type of life. Maybe it's based on something else. Or maybe there's universes that don't have any life. They start to form life, but for whatever reason, something about physics or chemistry is just slightly off. And those universes, there's never anybody alive to say, oh, wow, this universe looks like it was made for me. But to whatever extent that life form is what that universe produced, it was just as made for them as any other universe is for any other life that looks at it and thinks that it was made for it, which is, as far as we can tell, not at all. And it's so bizarre to look at. There are billions of galaxies with billions of stars, with billions of planets. And somebody thinks that all of that and the lengthy periods of time from the initial expansion of our universe, it is mostly dead. Life, to the extent that it exists in the universe, as far as we can tell, is just one tiny side effect of what the universe does. To say that, yes, the universe's constants and properties definitely are consistent with leading to life like us, but to state that that was the intent, that seems awfully wasteful. Like you could, I don't know that this could be done, but let's say we just completely eliminated half of the other galaxies in the universe. How would that impact life here on Earth, the life that we know about? Would it impact us at all? Well, I think it would depend on at what point in the universe's history you got rid of it. But if you pull a Thanos and you just snapped and immediately got half the galaxies in the universe gone, are we even going to notice? I mean, the night sky might be a little dimmer.
If we make the assumption that there are other galaxies beyond the threshold of our observable universe, because the speed of light's a limiting factor in what we can observe. If we assume there are other galaxies beyond that threshold and we wiped those galaxies out, by definition, by our current laws of science and physics, it cannot affect us. It is beyond our observable universe. Light will never travel from that area of the cosmos or the universe as a whole to us. It can literally never affect us by definition. So if those are out there, those could have been completely eliminated and it would have zero effect on us at all. So yeah, to Matt's point, if this was designed and this was fine-tuned, it's incredibly over-engineered and wasteful. We don't need all of that out there.
It's a huge Rube Goldberg machine. That's how Tracy Harris put it once when we were,
Yeah.
It's like a Wile E. Coyote thing where he wants to catch the Roadrunner and straps a wheeled helmet on his head and runs a wire across the ravine and straps a rocket onto his back and does all of this when, there are simply much better and much more efficient ways. But we're kind of far afield now, Joe. So hopefully some of that's helpful.
Yes, it's been very helpful. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Have a good day.
Thank you.
I did have a small thought. Yeah, thanks, Joe. Appreciate it. I did have a small thought, though. So, I mean, this has been talked about in other arguments about the existence of God. But in order for a God to make a choice, that would require two states. The state in which a choice has not been made and the state in which a choice has been made, which would involve time. Now you have time. You're already talking about some other, supernatural sense, but another universe already. So even those who criticize like the multiverse hypothesis and playing around with that idea, and people will say, "Oh, well, that's kind of really absurd," while they're positing some type of dimension, supernatural dimension, where a God exists in some form of time. You're already talking about a different reality there. Even under certain interpretations of that model or definitions of that model, you have to have at least two realities or two universes in order for that to happen. You have to have the supernatural one, in which time occurs, and then the natural one, which was a result of that choice being made. So it's already kind of like they're already stretching out into multiverses in that sense. I'm sure there's probably rebuttals or disagreements to it, but it was random thought I had in my head there. I was like, yeah, well, doesn't God inhabit his own universe, his own reality?
Yeah,
in order to make that
it's one of
choice.
those things when they talk about God existing outside of space and time, I don't know what it means to exist outside of time, because if you exist for no time, that's exactly the same as not existing. So while there may be time within our universe, there is at least, if there's some kind of God, there's at least something like a meta time or a super time,
something analogous.
Above our time. So it'd be like we're the Sims and there's game time, and then there's a programmer that is in real time or in their time. But the programmer isn't existing outside of space and time. He's just outside of our local space and time. But the person playing the Sims interacts with the Sims in a detectable way. And that doesn't happen. So I mean, we have no reason to think that happens. So yeah.
So what you're saying is, if you ever go swimming and the ladder suddenly just magically disappears while you're drowning, you can be sure that there's a God, right? You ever play The Sims?
It's we make a lot of assumptions. Like I like to drive. I drove a couple hours today. I don't like to drive as much as I used to. Like it was nothing for me to drive 18, 20 hours and then sleep. But at no point have I been driving down the highway and seriously considered the possibility that a solid brick wall would appear directly in front of my vehicle from apparently nowhere, from another dimension, from, none of this stuff. You start watching the MCU multiverse stuff and they're jumping around and everything else. At no point when I'm driving does the possibility of a brick wall materializing directly in front of me even cross my mind in any serious sense. It obviously crossed my mind enough to say it here.
Yep.
And so if you start making a list of the things that are so outlandish, they don't even enter our consideration. All the things that could appear directly in front of you. You take a look at that and you're like, hey, we don't ever really think that anything is just going to appear directly in front of us ever. And even when somebody does it, a magician or whatever, we tend to go, oh, there's some trick to that. They managed to sneak something. There's nobody, there's no circumstance where we're like, well, I'd love to come over and have dinner with you, Eric, but unfortunately, I'm just absolutely terrified that a Dungeons and Dragons beholder is going to appear in front of me while I'm driving over to your place and eat my car. I mean, you could infinitely many scenarios like that. And wow, I just use infinitely as if it were quantitative, and it's not, but set that aside.
It's mathematicians out there just wrenching their fists in anger.
Somebody's mad at me, but it's a colloquialism. Live with it. We got some theist callers and some other callers. So here we go.
All right.
Theo's calling from Texas, pronouns are he, him, and is a kind of deconverting Protestant with an argument for God that wants to know if we have a response to it. So Theo, welcome. If you got it, you're on with Matt and Eric. What's the argument?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Good to be on the show. I watch you guys a lot, and I've been learning a lot. So, like I said on my written thing there was this good argument, good point that I heard for God, and I'm trying to contrast it to some of the things I've heard on the show before. So, one of the things that I've heard from this show is that emotions and things like that are not good evidence to take into consideration when considering truth. So
I'm sorry. What's the good argument that you heard?
yeah, I'm getting there. So
Well, I need
basically,
you to actually. So Theo. I'm trying to help here. I don't need you to talk about things you've heard on the show, which may or may not be relevant to this. We don't know who said it. We don't know what the context was. We're not sitting here diminishing or eliminating emotions at all. We're talking about fallacies. So if you've heard what you think is a good argument for God and you'd like to hear our response to it, all I need to know is what is the good argument for God, and we'll give you our response.
okay. So the argument is something like this. So intuition, basically, without, I'll say, access to technology to show truth, is that enough for evidence? So I can give an example of this from the Bible. So, for example, King Saul. I don't know if you remember. If you probably remember the story of the two women, the one that rolled over and killed her baby, and then tried to claim the other baby. And King Saul knew nothing about this, right? But his intuition of he made a scenario where, okay, I'm going to share the baby. I'm going to cut the baby in half, and whoever claims the baby, and we'll just split it between you two. And then the actual mother was like, no, don't do that. And that was how Saul decided that was the real mother. So if that happened in our world today, I think that would be barbaric because we have DNA tests and things like that to show. But in those times, they had nothing like that. So their lack of access to technology made their intuition, in this case, Saul's intuition, this proposed scenario, kind of true, right?
The suggested conclusion of the story is that Saul decided to do a test, not
I think
merely,
it was Solomon. Sorry.
Yeah, so not
Solomon.
merely to do a test, the wisdom of King Solomon. It wasn't intuition. It was assessments of watching people with their kids and what we suspect people are likely to do and what they're willing to sacrifice for their kids. We're so good at it that we can tell when a new mother is suffering from things like postpartum depression because we can watch and see that they're not interacting with their kid in the way that we'd expect. We don't have to hook them up to an MRI. We don't have to do any sort of testing or whatever else. You can just observe this person is not acting in the way that we suspect. Now, in modern world, we know a great deal more about it. But let's assume that Solomon, through intuition or a deduction from having observed various other mothers, managed to get it right. How does that in any way demonstrate that there's a God involved?
Right. So the point that my friend tried to make with this argument was just like Solomon in that case, we do not have access to, I'll say, some of the technology or whatever it might take to access the divine. But can we use, would it be reliable source, knowing that this is possible to get to the truth based on some intuition, as demonstrated by Solomon? Could we use that to?
It wasn't intuition. Solomon's, to whatever extent it was intuition for Solomon, it was based on evidence and experience. We have plenty of examples of mothers and parents and what they are and aren't willing to do for their kids. We have no examples of other universes. We have no examples of gods. You have no evidence. It's not like Solomon just never interacted with another person and then decided to do this just based on gut instinct. It was a trained conclusion supported by evidence. You don't get to make that case for a God.
So are you saying that the mother's love for the baby or whatever is evidence? Isn't that taking emotion as evidence? Because that could be wrong. I mean, I don't want to say it's true, but there are some
Theo,
mothers
So
that may not love their
Theo,
babies. I mean, I don't think that's
yeah,
a universal thing.
wow, this is absolutely asinine. I just described a scenario where we can detect when a mother is not bonding with their baby, and now your response to me is it doesn't always happen. I literally just gave you an example of when it doesn't happen and how we can know it and how that's based on evidence. You cannot do a directly analogous argument for the existence of God, but we're not relying on mere emotion. There are emotions and they are detectable and identifiable, just like I can tell when someone is scared. I can tell when someone is in love. Now, could they be lying? Yes.
No, I understand what you're saying, Matt, but I feel like
You evidently
you're
don't. You evidently don't, because right after I gave you a specific example, you replied with that example as if we were unaware that sometimes there are exceptions.
okay. This is what I'm saying. This is what I mean. Your example of being able to detect postpartum depression is on the, I'll say, assumption that all mothers need to like their babies. I don't think that's
No.
the case.
No, it's not, Theo. See, you don't understand what I'm saying. If you'd stop thinking you understood what I was saying, and actually listened, we'd get somewhere. There's no assumption that every mother must do this. It's about statistical norms and what we declare as healthy interaction versus not. Just like I can tell when someone has a problem with a certain food, or when someone has a reaction to a particular bite. Not everybody is allergic to peanuts, but we can figure out who's allergic to peanuts.
Okay. So you're saying, okay, let me put in my words so I can make sure I understand what you're saying. You're saying statistically, mothers usually have healthy relationships with their baby. So if we see a mother who's not having that, then there's a higher probability that she's going through something, some postpartum depression or something like that. Is that
One
what
of the
you're saying?
possibilities. That is one of the possibilities.
Okay. Okay. Good. Okay. I understand that, and I agree with that. But I would say, so Solomon at this point, let's say this has always been the case in humanity, and he's observed this. However, as I said, if we were to bring that case to our world today, and a judge were to use this same method, we would say that judge was barbaric.
Yes, because we have better ways now than we did then.
But even if we didn't, let's say they didn't have access to that, knowing what we know now, would you say that trusting this probability statistic, there's just a higher chance, right? But there's also a chance that this mother may not care about her baby as much as the neighbor. Like, what I'm trying to say is that the actual...
Correct. So what?
Correct, right.
So
Okay.
what?
Yeah,
Why?
I'm trying to get there.
Stop. I have zero patience for you walking around the rosy road to get there. There are many ways. Nobody's saying that. First of all, you have no evidence that Solomon ever did this or that it actually happened. I think it would have been barbaric to do then. The entire purpose of the story is to provide an example of the wisdom of Solomon. It's not at all in any way a demonstration of anything of any use to any god. It's absolutely cruel. And yet,
Okay.
the point is that generally speaking, the mother that loves their child would rather that child live under bad circumstances where they don't get to be a part of it than that it die. Are there going to be exceptions? You bet. But that's the norm. What's the problem here? You don't need an intuition. It's not evidence for a God. And you cannot use the same model about norms to say, normatively, we have reason to think there's a God.
Okay, I guess you kind of called me, because I was going to say normatively, humans tend to have this assimilation towards the divine, this perspective towards the divine. So
No.
using that same
No.
Okay.
Normatively, humans make errors in their thinking, and you haven't demonstrated that anything divine is anything other than an error in thinking.
Okay.
There was a time.
Maybe I was high, but it seems like
Theo, there was
like
a time when
worthwhile.
there was a time when all humans, or at least a vast majority of humans, did not look at the stars and say, yeah, those are gigantic balls of burning gas. Some thought they were pinpricks in some type of canopy. Others thought they were spirits or other creatures. A vast majority of humans can intuitively lean away from what reality actually is. It adds no credence to those claims or those conclusions.
I understand. Well, one final question, at least for you. Would you say that, given what's the scenario that Solomon had and things like that, was he wise, relying on their emotional display, basically, to make this decision at that point?
I think that's one possible way to possibly get to the truth. Do I think it was particularly wise? No. Do you think it was wise?
No. I think it was wise, given the limited resources they had. I think it was, I think it was wise. Otherwise,
Theo, let's say I think it was wise. Just hypothetically, what does that tell us about it?
Okay, so at least what I thought of when I heard this was, given our limited resources. So, for example, if we say the supernatural, the divine is something like a plane that we can't access yet, given our limited resources, would it be wise to consult things such as these emotions and this intuition to make a decision on this?
So,
on God,
would it be wise to work off the assumption of if it was wise to work off of the assumption that some other plane of existence, the divine, exists? Would it be wise to use emotions to determine whether? No, because you have a massive assumption built into that whole thing already.
I have a question. Do you drive a car, Theo?
Yes.
Do you carry car insurance?
Yes.
I'd like to sell you some bonus car insurance that will protect you in case a brick wall ever materializes in front of your vehicle. Would you like to buy that insurance?
No, the probability of that happening is close to zero.
How do you know that?
There's been no evidence of things like that happening.
Cool. What's the probability that a god could reach down with its hand and stop your car dead in its tracks?
From my view, I would have to say, well, it's greater than the wall.
Well, how did you determine that? How did you determine that is more likely than the wall?
I guess I'm adding my beliefs into it, so I'm presupposing that God is there already.
You don't get to do that. When you say X is more probable than Y, that is an approximation or a calculation. It's not just, oh, because I believe it. What's the reason that you think it's more likely?
I guess there will be no reasonable reason.
Cool. Would you like to buy? I will sell you insurance right now that will absolutely pay to have your car repaired should God stick down his hand and squash your car. Do you want to buy that insurance?
No, I do not.
Why not? Isn't that, you just said it's more probable than the wall?
Well, if God decides to do that, then it's probably for a good reason.
Oh, what an absolutely pathetic and ridiculous response there, Theo. And when we're talking about, is something likely to happen? Do you think it's likely to happen? Would you protect against it? And then when you get cornered to show that your fallacious line of reasoning is just as silly about a wall as it is about God, now you're like, well, if God did it, there'd be a good reason. Well, congratulations on joining a cult and being willing to set aside everything about your actual person in favor of what you think a God would or wouldn't do.
Hey, Theo, your statement earlier, I'm still dwelling on it. When you asked that, when considering things, matters of the divine, is it okay to use emotions to make determinations about it? Let's go up another level. I'm going to posit that there's a super divine that is
Okay.
a required explanation for your divine. Is it reasonable to use emotions to make determinations about the super divine?
Could you explain that a little bit more? I
Sure.
feel like
So
I lost you there.
So your statement earlier, you said that when considering matters of the divine, or I'm guessing you're saying the supernatural. Let's just call it the supernatural if you don't object, because
Okay.
other theists use that.
No, that's good.
When considering matters of the supernatural, is it wise to use emotions to make conclusions about it? And I'm saying, well, hey, I'm going to say that your supernatural requires a super duper natural to explain it. Is it okay when considering matters of the super duper natural to use emotions to make determinations and conclusions about it? What would you say to that?
I would say if emotions is the if emotions is the step to get to that first supernatural level, then there will need to be something extra that you get from that level to appeal to get to the next super divine level. So from our third level, basement level, we can't.
Well, hold on now. Why are we even talking about the supernatural when the super duper natural is required to explain it? That's the posit. That's like the claim I'm making here. So you can't talk about the supernatural until you justify the super duper natural. What would be your objection to that?
Why did you make the jump that the super duper natural is necessary to explain the supernatural? I guess I missed the disconnect there.
Would you say that the supernatural? So Theo, would you make the claim that the supernatural is required to explain our reality?
I'll say so.
Okay, I'm making the same claim about the super duper natural to explain the supernatural. So I'm making the same claim as you, right? I'm saying
I get it. Yeah, no, I get it.
All right. So think about what because your statement that the supernatural exists, the assumption doesn't sit right with me. In the same way that the super duper natural, I'm guessing, doesn't sit right with you, right?
Right.
So the whole thing is kind of an exercise the whole thing is kind of a non-starter, because you first have to establish that such a thing exists before you can analyze whether emotions can make any conclusions about it, right?
Okay. I'll just finish with this. So I hear this a lot again from the show that basically circular argument of making the assumption first and then trying to find evidence to fit that assumption. I'll say that that's used in science. I mean, Einstein was only able to get general relativity by making that assumption.
No. It's not fucking circular reasoning. Einstein didn't begin with the conclusion and then work towards demonstrate. That's not fucking science at all.
That was what Einstein did for general relativity.
No, it's not. It's not what Einstein did. It is not circular reasoning. Einstein didn't begin with a conclusion and then argue towards the conclusion.
Literally what he did.
No. Okay. I'm sorry, but I have zero interest in speaking with you ever again, Theo. I'm happy to have you call again another time. But when I say that Einstein didn't do that, and you say it's literally what he did, you don't get to call back until you go get the homework done that shows that Einstein was making a circular argument.
I can show it right now if you want.
You are absolutely as confused and spouting bullshit about Einstein as you were about when you said you understood my point when you didn't.
I was trying to understand your points. I didn't mean to be disrespectful.
Okay, so which one was it, Theo? Which one was it? Did you understand my point, or were you just trying to understand my point? Because you said you understood my point. You said, shut up. You said you understood my point when you didn't. So which one was it?
Okay, so I thought I understood your point, which is why I said I understood it. And then when I said it, I didn't.
Einstein was doing something circular when he wasn't?
He literally did. I feel like
He literally
you
did.
don't know.
Theo, I bet you $1,000 right now that you cannot put together a valid and sound logical argument that shows that Einstein literally engaged in circular reasoning for relativity. You want to take that bet?
Sure.
Bring it. I'm going to hang up on
Okay.
you now. The next time you call, if you have a valid and
I
sound
can do it
syllogism-
right now. I mean,
No, you
big
can't do
deal.
it right now. You can't do it right now. When you call back, okay, are you stupid enough to think that you actually could construct a valid and sound syllogism right now?
I'll just tell you what Einstein did.
No.
Well
You need to answer my question, Theo. Are you stupid enough to think that you can put together a valid and sound syllogism about Einstein being circular right now?
I think so.
Cool. Send $1,000 to me via PayPal. And once you've done that, I will let you present your valid and sound syllogism. And if it's not valid and sound, and if it doesn't demonstrate that Einstein engaged in circular reasoning to demonstrate relativity, then I'm going to keep the money. And if it does not, if you don't make a valid and sound argument, I will return the money and add $1,000 to it.
I don't have 1,000.
Oh, then you shouldn't have taken the bet. Goodbye. Don't play with me, Theo.
I mean,
If
Theo
you-
is touching. Go ahead, man. Sorry.
But no, I'm just saying, if you're out there and you're like, oh, Einstein engaged in circular reasoning for this. Cool.
Yeah.
Somehow everybody else missed this.
Near the beginning, Theo was touching on some interesting things to think about, namely along the lines of epistemology and justification for beliefs, whether it be personal beliefs or just your typical observations that a typical human makes in the world, or even science. Like, if you were to remove the scientific process, what would equal good justification for adopting certain beliefs? And we can analyze history, and we can see that. We can see how conclusions were reached beforehand. We can analyze how the likelihood of those conclusions were true and such, and how many times we've seen it reached bad conclusions. We can actually have a really good study there about justification and how we've refined these processes over time. That's something that we could potentially go into. And if we took away the scientific method, or we took away even just like evidence-based investigation, like we see in courts, and we were to rely on just like people's emotional responses to accusations or certain impending actions, like in the case of King Solomon, maybe it could be argued that was a decent process considering the limited tools they had. I don't know, but
it comes down to
take
was
that
it actually going to do it.
Yeah, exactly. But to take that and say, okay, well, since it worked back then before we had better tools, is it a good way to do it now? And we could say that, well, hey, we broke rocks apart back then by smashing it with other rocks, but now we have jackhammers and bulldozers to do that. Does that mean smashing rocks together is still a good way to do it? No, I would say not.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Aside
from that, good.
There are legitimate, serious scientists who have accused Einstein of circular reasoning, but despite the fact that they made this accusation, there has not been, and it could actually be possible. None of them have put together a valid and sound syllogism demonstrating this is the case, but Theo thinks that he can. And it's because Theo reads things at a surface level and assumes that he understands it and thinks that he's playing at Einstein's level. That, oh, it's okay, we can just use intuitions. No, there are things where we've trained our intuitions to where they're more likely to be correct. It takes work. This is the cornerstone of skepticism, is to train your intuitions, train your gut so that it is more likely to be correct. But that is when you base the process of training your gut in sound evidence and demonstration. And that's how, for example, I just went online the other day and took this, how good are you at spotting fake headlines? And so it's a quick 20 question test. I got 19 out of 20. I found every one of the false ones, and one of the real ones I also thought was false. Cool. So none of us are perfect. There are some people that posted and got perfect scores there. When it comes to Einstein, if you're going to make the case or try to make the case that, for example, his paper on relativity was ultimately circular because of an assumption that essentially his conclusion is included in an assumption, you're still not talking about a constructed syllogism. And some of the best scientists on the planet are still disputing this. And so if there's dispute and not an actual consensus, you would be the first in history to make a valid and sound argument for this, which is why I'm, comfy with it. The reality is, let's assume that the scientists and Theo who are convinced that Einstein did something circular in creating his paper on relativity, let's say they're all right. What does that get us again? Why were we talking about whether or not Einstein was right? Do you think that Einstein just intuited E equals MC squared or whatever? But even if we granted everything, let's say Einstein's sitting around one day and just intuits E equals MC squared and runs with it. That tells us nothing at all about whether or not we should rely on intuition. It doesn't tell us whether Einstein should have relied on intuition. It doesn't tell us whether I should rely on my intuition or if I should rely on Einstein's intuition, because I know people who have rely on their intuition who are monumentally wrong on a regular basis. And so the thing that Eric and I were both talking about is your intuition is only as good as it is. You can have an intuition that's just absolutely terrible and unreliable. I think I'd be willing to take any number of comparative tests where Theo and I test our intuition and our basic knowledge and all these other things. And the strange things is that Theo calls in and is like, hey, I'm a theist and I heard this good argument for God, and I want to know if you guys can respond to it. But the good argument for God is, if Solomon can use his intuition to correctly determine who the baby's mom is, then we can use our intuition to infer that a God exists. I mean, not all intuitions are on equal footing. Not all of them are equally reliable. And the way we would build an intuition about how a parent interacts with a child is fundamentally different and has way more available information than how we would talk about intuiting that a God exists. But I don't know. We got more calls.
So, all those intuitions, if that story did occur, I'm not saying it didn't, I have no idea. But didn't Solomon interact with numerous people before that? Numerous mothers and fathers and other people. Is he not himself a father in that case? Like he's already operating on a good set of evidence in order to perform this, test, and then come to a conclusion that he deemed it's being presented as, he was 100% right, even though the scripture I don't think actually establishes afterwards that he was in fact correct. I'm sure it was implied.
I think it's written where it does.
Yeah.
I'd have to look again. I think it was written where it does suggest that it was the real mother.
Suggested.
But I'm not sure if it actually explicitly referred to
assuming
mother.
Yeah, assuming he was correct in that occurred and he was correct, he was operating himself off of certain probabilities from his past experiences. And our tools have refined and our investigation methods have refined to this day, but we're still on that same system of confidence levels. Just our tools now help us to reach much higher confidence levels than emotions and intuitions back then could get you. So just because in this one case, let's say it occurred and he was correct in that doesn't mean it was a good tool. It just simply means that the probabilities was on his side and he happened to pick the right choice. He could have, and nothing about that intuition actually factually or in any type of like logical sense establishes it. He was like in a court case today, like in the United States during the trial, evidence is presented, testimony is given. Emotions can be at play there, like when you're trying to establish, let's say, like the motive of a murderer, and you say, Joe was super angry at Alex, and that's a reason why he probably killed him. You're still just building up evidence to build up to certain confidence levels. So there's we have better ways today, but we can still be wrong today, just hopefully to a lesser extent that they were wrong back then. So again, like if we're going to talk about whether or not, absent of our current tools, that was a good way to do it, we could have that conversation, but it doesn't necessarily mean that he would have reached the right conclusion 100% of the time. He could have easily been wrong. And it could have easily been that the woman that was indifferent to the baby being cut in two was in fact the mother, and the one that was concerned was not the mother. Like, plot twist. Anyway.
Yeah. If you go, I just pulled it up. It's 1 Kings 3, starting at verse 16. So the story is there's two prostitutes who came to the king, stood before him. One says, "My lord, this woman and I live in the same house. I gave birth to a child while she was in the house. Then on the third day after I gave birth, this woman also gave birth, and we were alone. There was no one else with us in the house. Only the two of us were in the house." So already this is reading like one of the first true thought experiments. Like, you found a body, but there's no doors and no windows or whatever else, but we're the only two in the house. And it says, "And this woman's son died in the night because she lay on him. And she rose at midnight and took my son from me while your servant slept. And I laid him at her breast and laid her dead son at my breast. When I rose in the morning and nursed my child, behold, he was dead. But I looked at him closely in the morning. Behold, he was not the child that I'd born." The other woman said, "Nope, the living child's mine and the dead child is yours." And the first said, "Nope, the dead child is yours and the living one's mine." And that's what they said to the king. And then the king said, "This one says, 'This is my son that's alive and yours is dead.' And the other one says, 'This is your son that's dead and mine's alive.' And the king says, 'Bring me a sword.' And the king said, 'Just divide the child in two, give the half to one and half to the other.' And it says, the woman whose son was alive," so they do identify her as actually being the woman whose son was alive, "said to the king, 'Oh, my lord, give her the child and by no means put him to death.' But the other woman said, 'He shall be neither mine nor yours, divide him.'" And anybody with any sense then making a decision would do exactly the same thing that Solomon did, which is to give the baby intact to the woman who was not willing for it to be killed. It wasn't just one of them was like, "Oh, no, I'd rather she have my son than it be dead." It was the other one was, "No, kill it. Neither of us get a kid." And it doesn't even matter at that point who the actual mother was. The humanistic thing to do in the interest of the child is to give the child to the one that doesn't want to fucking kill it, and to go get the one that wants to kill it some help. So there's a little bit more to the story, as expected, than Theo's including in there. And the thing is, how wise was it? Well, if you think that we found who the real mother is, in that story, I think it's pretty reasonable to conclude that was probably the real mother who ended up with the baby. But at the end of the day, I don't care who the real mother was. The one who didn't want to kill the kid is the one that got it. And that's what should happen. And if I have, so for example, if I have, a baby, and I know that the mother of the baby is fine with somebody killing it, I should take that baby away, even if I don't have anybody else to give it to right now. There's a lot of things in this story that go beyond just Solomon had an intuition. No, Solomon's wisdom wasn't mere intuition. It was a good understanding of human nature and of what a real mother that's connected with their child would be likely to do. And it's also about this one, whether it's the real mom or not, is definitely not the one we want to give a baby to. But I don't know.
Not to squeeze further blood from this stone, but maybe we drew a parallel to like divorce court today, where you have two parents, they're divorcing, they're both arguing for custody of a child. Can you imagine if the judge would pose a hypothetical, like, "Oh, let's just not worry about getting the child to you two. I'm just going to ship the child off to an orphanage," and then he gauges the emotional response from both parents and judges his decision based off of that. It's like perhaps you can have a parent who says, "Well, hey, you know what? I don't think either of us can maybe give him the future he needs. Maybe he's going to have a better chance in an orphanage than with either of us." So that parent will be maybe more enthusiastic to give away the child to an orphanage, while the other parent, maybe you could come up with all kinds of like these little edge cases of a scenario where a judgment of an emotional response may not necessarily lead to the truth or to the most desired outcome. But this is exactly what I would expect with Bronze Age tales of morality and of trying to prop up Solomon and his god he worshipped as the best. This is exactly what you would expect.
So I'm going to take one call real quick because I can knock this out fairly quickly. Josh is calling in to defend the position, claiming that I said if it were me, I would quit my job, when that's not what I said.
Okay, then what did you say?
I said, I can tell you now I wouldn't work there.
How is that different from if it was you, you would not have the job? You would not keep the job.
I'm not saying anything at all about anybody else's circumstances or situation. And I'm not saying that that person is in a position where they could or should quit their job. I'm saying I wouldn't be working there in the first place. That's me. That's not me telling somebody else they shouldn't have been working there in the first place. So if I'm not
you're financially secure in a way that other people aren't.
No. It has nothing to do with financial security. I'm not telling somebody else how to live their life. I'm saying what job I wouldn't have taken myself. It has nothing to do with financial security. I am financially insecure and have been many times. I could find jobs that are unethical or jobs that I don't want and make a fuck ton more money than I make right now. It's not privilege that I'm exercising to say, ooh, I'd never work there. I'm just saying I wouldn't have been working there. That's it.
And that's a comment on your position in society.
No,
Caller,
it's a comment.
are you driving?
It's a comment on what position, on what jobs I would and wouldn't accept normatively. Are you driving?
No, I'm sitting parked in my car. You understand my current my lifestyle situation, right? That was communicated to you by the screener?
Yes, and I don't see how it's relevant to this at all because I didn't tell anybody else how they should live their life. Because did I tell anybody else how they should live their life?
No, you did not. That's not the point I'm making. The point I'm making is that
what point did I get wrong?
Your comment is a commentary on there are people that have to keep jobs that
No, see, I'm going to mute you. We're going to try this again. If I didn't tell anyone else how to live their life, then my comment cannot be commentary on anybody else's life, can it?
Hello?
Yes. If I wasn't telling anybody how to live their life, how is my commentary? How is my commentary on somebody else's life?
Because you're speaking from if it was you, that you would not have taken the job.
No.
And I am saying, my point.
That's not what I said.
You just said you would not have taken the job.
No, I didn't. You can't fucking listen for shit. I said, I can tell you I wouldn't work there. That is not the same as I wouldn't have taken the job. I'm saying I wouldn't work there, but I'm still talking about me. And if I'm only talking about me, how the fuck is that a commentary on anybody else? Last fucking chance.
I called in not to make a commentary about you making a commentary of someone else.
Last fucking chance. How is me talking about me commentary on somebody else? Last chance.
It is not. It is not.
Good. Goodbye. That should have been much quicker. It was really easy. At no point am I suggesting that somebody who wants a job or needs a job or is desperate for a job shouldn't take any fucking job that's available. It's not just, ooh, I didn't fucking judge that person. I didn't say they shouldn't have had that job. I was talking about me alone. I'm sorry, you're too stupid to fucking understand that. But not everything I say about me is a commentary on anybody or everybody else. Here we go. This is much better. Paul's calling from Maryland and wants to tell us how to have a personal relationship with God. That could be wonderful and useful. Paul, welcome to the show. Which God are we talking about, and how can we have a personal relationship with that God?
Well, I'll tell you this: it's not the Christian God. I don't believe that the Bible is correct, but I don't want
when
to
I
show.
say Paul, when I ask what God it is, I don't need you to start off by telling me what God it isn't, because we'll be here till the end of time rattling off
Sure,
gods it isn't. What God is it?
I do not have a name for it. It's a personal experience that I've had.
Okay, you had a personal experience, and you're calling it God. What's the justification for calling it God? What properties does your God have?
Not he necessarily. I'm using that as a Christian perspective. That's not mine. But it's a little bit like George Burns in that movie. You know, it moves around different people from time to time.
Your God possesses individuals?
That's correct.
How do you know?
Well, I don't.
Then why do you believe something if you don't have what's the good reason to believe that there's a God that's jumping around?
If there wasn't a God that was jumping around from person to person, then why would we have so many religious beliefs and so self-proclaimed prophets?
Because people make mistakes in their thinking, and people are fearful of things, and people are confused and irrational. Why isn't that enough to explain all the different gods?
Yeah, I think humans just desire explanations to things because it makes them feel safe, and we have a track record of accepting explanations that are not justified.
I mean, your argument itself is literally fallacious. So your argument is an example of why we have a bunch of fallacious beliefs.
Okay, well, what do I do to get you yelling at me? Because that's the content you want, right?
No, I don't want to yell at anybody or anything else. What I do.
Well, you seem to want to yell a lot. I don't think you've ever had any Snickers bars.
Well, evidently you're dishonest not only in argument but in your assessment of things, because that's not the way things go. So one of the things we talked about is I don't need people calling in for esoteric bullshit concepts of God that don't tie to anything and don't have evidence for them. I said that at the beginning of the show. Did you hear that?
No.
Yeah, you should go back and listen to the beginning of the show. And when you have a God belief that you can describe, like you said, you'd tell us how to have a personal relationship with a God. How do you have a personal relationship with this God that you're talking about?
Oh, that's easy. You go in the woods and don't eat or drink for 3 days.
Okay, so if I go in the woods and I don't eat or drink for 3 days, what will happen?
You will start to hallucinate.
Okay, but hallucinations, why on earth? We're asking you how to have a personal relationship with God, and you're telling us how to hallucinate. Hallucinations, right, generally speaking, aren't real. So, and also, right, if you go 3 days without water, you could die. So,
and you will meet God.
You don't. If you die, how do you know you meet God?
Ooh, okay. That's a good question. That's a good question.
Yeah, it is. And if
knowing is really not important.
If you weren't a little troll, you would have already thought of this, but you don't think beyond the beginning of your trolling. You didn't think to the end. So if somebody goes out in the woods for 3 days without water, there's a good chance they could die. And you're saying, yeah, but then you'll meet God. And so when I ask, how do you know you'll meet God? Now you're trapped because you haven't done that. You haven't gone out into the woods for 3 days without food and water, have you?
That's absolutely correct, sir.
Yeah. So when you called in to say, here's how you have a personal relationship with God, you don't have a personal relationship with your personal relationship, and you don't have a personal relationship with truth, do you?
Now you're calling me a liar.
Yes, I think you're a liar.
Well, how do you know that, sir?
I don't know it. I'm just telling you what I'm convinced of, because you've been dishonest multiple times throughout this, and you're trying to suggest that the way to have a personal relationship with God is one that can lead to death, and that you haven't done.
Okay, we're just yapping here like all humans do all the time.
No, we're not yapping. You got hung up on. Goodbye. All right. So since we couldn't get an actual argument for the existence of God, and since we got a troll who says you can go out in the woods and try to starve yourself into a personal relationship with God, Marjorie's calling in from New York to ask us, who are we to judge how God governs his world? I'm not aware that there is a God governing anybody, but why wouldn't I be allowed to judge? I mean, isn't that what we're supposed to do?
Good evening. May I clarify what I told the screener?
Yeah.
So I actually put in the type, I said, and when it says topic or question, I have a word of the Lord for Matt, and I have one question about sovereignty. And what I told the screener was that everyone governs something. You guys govern this channel, people govern cities and nations, and we run them the way that we want. So how do we, yes, we can judge, but in light of the fact that are we free from the harm that we say other people or God does? That was my...
Well, I'm confused. So I know you've got it. You think you've got a word of the Lord for me. We'll get to that in a second. I'll make sure you do that. But do you believe in a devil too?
Yes.
Is God the good one and the devil the evil one?
Evil as in what? That the devil is God?
No. I'm saying there's God and then there's the devil, and you think
Right.
God is good and the devil is evil, right?
I think God is, and that he is. And yes, I do believe he's good.
Okay, well, that's what I asked. So you believe God's good.
Right.
Do you believe the devil is evil?
Yes.
So what criteria did you use to judge them to determine that God is the good one and the devil is the evil one?
Excellent question.
I know.
The, the outcomes, the intent, the purpose.
You're just giving me single words that have no substance here. They're
Because
not arguments.
I can't see your face, so I don't want to interrupt and get yelled at. I'm sorry. I can't see your face.
So I'm asking,
No.
so you called in to say, who are we to judge God? But you've judged God and determined that God is good.
No. My question was regarding sovereignty.
No.
So, okay.
You said that the whole thing was, who are we to judge God or how God governs his world?
Right. Yes.
Right.
And we also govern things.
So where's the demonstration that there's a God that governs anything?
Okay, that's just some people's belief system, right?
Well,
like whether you agree with it or not.
It's the belief system you need to defend. You're calling in to say that there's a God who governs things, and I'm saying, how can we know that?
Well, I've heard you guys talk about what you did and didn't like on other occasions, like, why would God allow cancer in children?
Sure.
No?
Marjorie, you're calling in to defend the notion that there's a God that governs. What is the demonstration that that's true?
I'm calling in about a question about sovereignty. That if we govern...
Marjorie,
yes,
you think there's a God that is sovereign, correct?
Yes.
Prove it.
It's difficult, but...
Not my problem. I don't believe it. I don't tend to believe things that are difficult or impossible to prove.
Right.
Maybe Eric will have a different way of phrasing the question that'll be more helpful for you. I don't know how to do that.
Hey, Marjorie, so by your admission, what I'm gathering here is that you can't think of a good way to demonstrate the existence of this thing that you're claiming we are judging. Is that correct?
Could you say that one more time?
We're asking you to please demonstrate, give us some evidence that the thing that you claim Matt and I are judging actually exists? Because I could say, hey, you're judging the fairy in my backyard by not believing in it or something like that. But I have to demonstrate, that's on me to demonstrate that a fairy lives in my backyard. You're claiming that your God exists, and you're claiming that we have judgments about him, me and Matt, but you aren't demonstrating to us, showing at us, presenting any evidence that this God actually exists.
Right. I'm kind of lost. Please forgive me because
it's okay. It's kind of a non-starter. Based on what I'm saying is that the conversation is a non-starter because we have to first agree that something exists before we can start talking about judgments of this thing.
Right.
And even go back to the beginning. What Matt was trying to establish earlier was you're claiming. This is what I gathered. If I'm wrong, correct me.
Okay.
You're saying that me and Matt make judgments about your God, and who are we to do that, right? But when you, right?
Yeah.
Because that's in your thing here. You're asking, who are we to judge how God governs, right? Who are we as humans to judge such a thing?
Right? And may I just add the rest of it that I told the screener? When we govern things, right? Who are we to judge how God governs his world when we govern things and we do the way that we want?
Right. So going back, so
if I'm
Marjorie,
in charge of something, can people judge me and determine whether or not I'm doing a good job?
They can. Doesn't make them right.
So sure, it doesn't make
Marjorie,
them right. You're correct.
Marjorie, do you think the way God does things is good and just and right?
I think God has perspectives that we don't always have.
I'm asking you directly for your opinion about something.
Okay,
for instance,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Are you a Christian, Marjorie?
I am.
Okay. Do you think God sending Jesus to die for mankind was a good thing?
It benefited humans. It benefited.
Is that a good thing?
Yes.
Okay.
If
you just
that
passed
was the methodology
Marjorie, right there, Marjorie, you just passed judgment on God. It was positive judgment, but judgment nonetheless. So
I
who
never
are you
said
to
you
do
couldn't
that?
judge. Please forgive me. I wasn't trying to say you couldn't judge.
Well, obviously we can all judge, but you're asking who are we to do such a thing? So I can flip that on you and say, who are you to judge that sending Jesus was good?
So may I give just a earthly example so that you understand what I'm saying? We look at a CEO, we hear news that this CEO is about to lay off 10,000 people, and everyone's coming at the CEO like, you're so terrible, how these people won't have jobs, they won't have money, the holidays are coming, like, all the things that people say. But the CEO governed his company accordingly. So to us, it looks terrible. But he or she had to make a choice and had to lay off some people.
Can the CEO be wrong? Can the CEO be wrong?
From my point of view, if I was losing my job,
actually wrong, not just a matter of opinion. Wrong. Is it possible for a CEO to make a decision that is wrong, like objectively wrong?
For his company?
Yes.
Excellent question, but if it's his company, right? If it's his company,
Marjorie,
I'm sorry.
Marjorie, CEOs don't own a company.
Mm-hmm.
They don't necessarily own a company. So let's assume, though, that I'm the CEO of my company, which I am.
Yeah. Okay.
Is it possible for me to make bad decisions as
we
the
all
CEO?
Do. Yeah.
Okay. Is it possible for God to make bad decisions?
No.
Why not?
Because the God of my understanding is perfect.
Yeah, but you have a God of your understanding, but we have no demonstration that that God is real or that it's actually perfect. So if I can be wrong and God can't, why can I do something that God can't do? Does that make me more powerful than God?
No, but you have a perspective from where, well, CEOs can own a company, but
Sure, they can, but
you
they
have
don't
a,
necessarily own a company. A chief executive
absolutely,
officer isn't
absolutely.
necessarily the owner. Sure. So
You're
the point I was
correct,
trying to get
depending on the
to is that
corporation.
the point I tried to get to is that a CEO can make mistakes, and then people can judge that CEO, and they could be correct that the CEO made a mistake, or they could be incorrect. And so if I judge God, the mere fact that you claim there's a God that's perfect doesn't impress me at all, because I'm not aware that there is a God at all, and I'm definitely not aware of a perfect God.
Right. So if the CEO, if we can still go with that example, makes a decision and I don't like it, I'm not
Mhm.
his or her peer, I'm not, I don't work at the company or whatever, I could just say it's a bad decision, but I don't
Yep.
know all the ins and outs, right?
Okay, but how did you determine it was a bad condition? Did you have enough information to determine it was bad?
I was simply looking at, tens of thousands of people lost their jobs.
Okay, but were you right that it was a bad decision, or were you wrong?
I don't work at the company. I wouldn't know. I don't know what the
So,
books look
so
like.
Marjorie, here's
I
the
don't know.
problem. We keep trying to do this analogy, and every time I ask you the hard questions, you avoid them, and every time I ask you the easy
I
questions, you
promise
come
you
up.
I'm not.
Every time,
Please
okay,
give
yeah,
me
I'm pretty
another chance.
sure you are, and you're fucking interrupting me, which is not a really good move right now. So, if there's a CEO, and it makes
Yes.
that CEO makes an objectively bad decision, and there are people that
Mm-hmm.
agree with it and people that disagree. Their opinions are irrelevant. The people who think it was bad are correct, right?
Okay. Yes.
Okay. If there is a God and that God makes a decision, and I think that decision is objectively wrong, how could we tell
Yes.
whether or not I'm correct?
How can we tell if I'm correct? Well, do you have all the information available?
No. But do I have
And
enough information is the question.
you'd have to qualify enough.
Well, so for example, the God that you're advocating for,
Yes.
did that God punish Adam and Eve and every one of their descendants for disobeying?
Yes.
And see, I don't think that story happened, but if it did happen, I think that God is fundamentally immoral, because according to the story, Adam and Eve ate from the tree of what?
The knowledge of good and evil.
Right. So before they ate from that tree, they didn't have an understanding of good and evil, did they?
But they were given the command not to eat from that
Okay.
tree.
But so see, here's the thing. I just asked a very specific question that's going to expose
Mm-hmm.
the flaw in your thinking. And instead of
Okay.
answering it, you answered a different question. So here we go. Before they ate from the tree, did they know right from wrong?
No.
Okay. If they didn't know right from wrong, how could they possibly know that it was wrong to disobey God and eat from that tree?
They confessed that they knew they weren't supposed to eat from it.
I'm sorry, Marjorie. The question I asked, if they did not know right from wrong, how could they have possibly known that it would be wrong to disobey God?
Forgive me. If I tell my child not to do something,
I'm sorry, Marjorie. Your child already knows right from wrong. Adam and Eve did not know right from wrong. How, if they don't know right from wrong, how can they possibly know that any particular action they take, any action, would be wrong?
because they were told The day you eat, you'll die.
But they don't
That's
know that it's
that's
wrong.
correct.
They don't know that it's wrong, and they don't know that and it's not even wrong to die. So there's not only is dying not wrong or immoral, they had no understanding of what would be wrong. How can you punish someone for doing something wrong if they didn't know it was wrong?
I told you not to touch it.
I asked you to answer the question.
And Marjorie, you're
So
sidestepping
how,
the question.
I'm really not. How can
Yeah,
they?
you really are. I've done this for 20 years. You're doing that. You really are.
I
It's really simple.
understand that.
It's really
Can I?
simple, Marjorie. If someone does
It's
not know the difference,
disobedience.
shut up, Marjorie, and answer my question. If someone doesn't know the difference between right and wrong, how can you hold them responsible for doing something that is wrong?
Okay. So your question is, how can you hold someone responsible for doing wrong if they don't understand that what is quote unquote wrong, right?
Yes.
Okay.
If you punish someone and
I
they didn't know
understand.
right from, if you punish someone for doing something wrong and they didn't know right from wrong, is that moral or immoral? The punishment.
They had a command not to touch it.
I'm sorry, you keep avoiding the question. So let's do this really easy. Let's say your baby is 1 year old and doesn't understand that it would be wrong to take a crayon and draw on the wall. They just don't know that that's wrong.
Right.
If they take a crayon and draw on the wall, would it be moral for you to beat the shit out of them and throw them in the basement for the rest of their life?
No.
No. And what did your God do when two people did something that was wrong that they didn't know was wrong?
Did I ever tell the child not to write on the wall?
I'm sorry. Every time I ask you the question that exposes the absolute bullshit in your beliefs, you come back with a different question on a different subject. What did God do to the two people who did not know right from wrong when they did something wrong? What did God do? Did God curse them and all of their descendants and damn them
Yes.
to hell absent salvation?
He punished them. Yes.
Yeah. And so God is immoral in that story.
Marjorie, I'm gonna try to reframe exactly what Matt just said, the point he was getting to. Let's roll back just one step. I'm gonna try to reframe this. I'm gonna ask you a series of really short questions. Please answer
Sure.
these succinctly, okay? Going back to the CEO example, okay?
Uh-huh.
CEO lays off 10,000 people, all right?
Mm-hmm.
From the perspective of the 10,000 people with their families now losing their income, that was a bad decision, right? Because from the worker's point of view, my family.
Yes, from the perspective
Okay,
of the
yes.
family. Yes.
But from the CEO's point of view, the bottom line's now been improved, and that's good for the company, right? So that was a good decision, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Okay. Let's say instead now the CEO made a decision that laid off everybody and tanked the company. That's a universally bad decision, right? Because now the people are out of work and income, and the company's now kaput, right? Bad decision, right?
I wouldn't say universally bad.
I mean, both options you're examining, both from the CEO and the human or the workers, bad decision, right? The company's gone and people are out of work.
But we both know that there are people who actually do that.
I'm asking you, was that a bad decision? If the goal for the CEO is to improve the bottom line and he tanks the company, bad decision. If the goal of the worker is to make money for their families and they're laid off because of the CEO's decision, bad decision, right?
Okay. Yes.
Okay. All right. Now hold on to that. We now have a universally bad decision made by the CEO. Let's transfer this analogy now to the God in the garden. All right. Now we can make all kinds of arguments against this God, saying this God made a decision that both harmed mankind and harmed his sovereignty or his plan. He allowed the serpent to deceive Eve. He set up a scenario, which what Matt was bringing up, that Adam and Eve couldn't have possibly have passed because they didn't have the knowledge of good and evil. They didn't have the knowledge that this was a bad thing they were about to do. God made a decision that both harmed his plan and his sovereignty and our prosperity. Universally bad decision, right?
Mr. Eric,
Yes.
they were told not to eat of the tree.
It doesn't matter what they
Okay.
were told. It's what God allowed based on his own decision. Hopefully you
Wait, tell
understand
You're
why we
right.
can look at that. Hopefully
sorry.
I'll wrap this up here. Hopefully you
No, no.
can understand how we can look at that and go, yeah, bad move, God. Universally bad decision. Thank you so much. Thankfully, we don't think that God exists or these stories even happened. But hypothetically, if they did, we can look at that and judge it because we're affected by it.
Right. So I'm missing why the command not to eat of the tree
Could
is
your
disregarded.
could your God have accomplished his goals with or without the command? He's all powerful, right?
Which goals? Salvation?
Salvation,
Which goals?
sovereignty, human prosperity, all those things. The command is an irrelevant point in the situation because God, with or without that command, could have accomplished his goals. The command is just a distraction. It doesn't matter what
If
Adam and
they
Eve was
had
told.
eat-
It's the decisions and the things that God allowed happen. That's our question here.
So if they had eaten without the command, I'd have to agree with you. But they had an express command.
How do they know? How do they know that it would be wrong to disobey the express command? I asked this 20 minutes ago.
Because
it was a good question, and it's still a good question.
And 20 minutes ago, I told you they were told they would die. I'm sure they understood. I want to live.
No, you don't. You don't. Wow. How can this is so incredibly frustrating?
I'm sorry.
If they're told they're going to die, how do they know that's wrong? What's wrong with dying, Marjorie?
You cease to live. You cease to fulfill whatever you wanted to do. You cease to have your relationship.
Is that wrong?
You cease
Is
to
that
have,
wrong? Is that wrong?
when you were supposed to live forever? I think so.
Well, I'm about, like, I would be bald now after ripping my hair out if I weren't already bald. The fact of the matter, Marjorie, the fact of the matter is that it is immoral to hold someone responsible for something that they do not understand. If I tell you, do not eat from the tree on your left, and you don't know your left from your right, and you eat the tree on the left, should you be held responsible?
No.
Cruel. If I tell you not to eat this tree because you'll die, and you don't know what right and wrong is, how can I hold you responsible for doing something wrong?
Because
it would be just as immoral. It would be just as immoral to hold someone responsible for not knowing that what they did was wrong as it would be to hold someone responsible for not knowing that they ate from the tree on the left. If they don't know left from right, if they don't know right from wrong.
But now we're assuming we know all that they knew.
No, we're not, Marjorie. What tree did they fucking eat from?
The tree of the knowledge of good and evil.
And before they ate from that tree, did they know the difference between right and wrong? You already said no.
But we're assuming.
No. I give up.
Please don't.
No, I'm giving up. I'm letting Eric continue. But I I don't know how else to explain this. I even came up with what I think is a really great analogy with left and right, and you got it immediately. You got it immediately in the analogy, and you can't get it in the actuality. Every time I asked a question that should expose this, you wanted to jump to a different analogy, and then when I do an analogy that you got immediately, you refuse to connect that to the situation. It's really simple. If your 1-year-old grabs a marker and scribbles all over the wall, and they don't know it's wrong, is it immoral for you to punish them at all?
Yes.
Then if Adam and Eve did not know right from wrong, it must also be immoral to punish them for doing something wrong, correct?
If they did not know right from wrong, yes.
And you said that
Did they know? Yeah. Did they know right from wrong before eating the fruit?
How can we know what they knew?
Oh my God.
Except for what the text says.
Because the text says that they ate the fruit, therefore they gain the knowledge of right and wrong, and they now must be prevented from eating the fruit of life, so they don't gain immortality.
Right.
Okay, so that implies that by eating the fruit, you gain the attributes of those fruit, right? So simple basic deduction says that before they ate the fruit of knowledge of good and evil, they didn't have that. And you made Matt rage quit, by the way. Congrats. But do you understand what we're saying, Marjorie? I can't believe, Marjorie, for a moment here that you really don't understand what we're saying to you here. Okay, so Marjorie.
I do understand.
So Marjorie, so why are you so uncomfortable as to admit that, hey, yeah, Adam and Eve didn't have the knowledge of good and evil before they ate the fruit. And they committed an action without that knowledge, and then they committed an action without that knowledge, and now God punishes them for that. It would be the same way as punishing a 1-year-old for drawing on the wall. They don't have any understanding what they're doing. Same thing.
Because we don't know all that they knew or didn't know.
Marjorie, I just walked you through it with the tale.
You
right?
did.
And if we don't know, by the way, that's a completely separate conversation. If we don't know, that's a deficiency on your God's part, because he could have put enough in the Bible for us to know. But from my point of view, we know enough here to look at that and judge that as immoral, because this is the same. God has punished both these infantile humans plus all their descendants who didn't even exist yet, for a wrong that those two original humans couldn't have even comprehended as being wrong. That's immoral. And I think an almighty, all-loving, all-knowing God could have come up with a better system than this.
I'm sorry, I missed a little bit. I missed a little bit because I went up the restroom. But when you say that we have to speculate about what they knew, if they already knew right from wrong, what did they gain from eating the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil?
The death process. And their eyes were open.
So the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil doesn't teach you good from evil. It teaches you about death.
No, you said, what did they gain? And I said, the death process began. And their eyes were opened.
Yeah, but
what is the eyes open?
What I'm saying is, what did the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil do? Did it teach them right from wrong?
Did it teach them right from wrong? Well, we know that they understood that they were naked and they were ashamed.
Marjorie,
is it wrong to be naked?
No.
So before they ate the tree, they didn't know that it was wrong to be naked. Then they ate the fruit and they knew that it was wrong to be naked. And now you're saying it's not wrong to be naked. So who's right?
The scriptures just say their eyes were open, they were naked, and they were ashamed. And they hid from the presence of God.
Why would they be? So if if they were ashamed after getting the knowledge of good and evil, doesn't that mean
Right.
it's evil to be naked?
Never thought about that one, but okay. I can go with that. That they
So
thought
be
so. That they thought so. Not that I think
well,
so.
if the tree gave them the knowledge of good and evil, then clearly they're right when they say that it's shameful to be naked.
Okay.
So it must be shameful to be naked, right?
In some instances, I guess it is.
Okay, cool. I think we can solve this right now. Before they ate from the tree, they were naked, right?
Yes.
And they weren't ashamed, right?
Yes. Correct.
And then they ate from the tree and they were
Mm-hmm.
then ashamed because they were naked, right?
Yes.
So they gained knowledge, and part of
Mm-hmm.
that knowledge was that it was shameful to be naked, right?
Yes.
If it's actually shameful to be naked, would it have been okay for God to punish them for being naked? You can say yes, that's the right answer.
I thought they were punished for disobedience.
Wow. Please stop telling me what you think they were punished for, because I know what they were punished for. That's not the question I asked. If you answer the question I ask, we can get there. Would it be okay if it is truly the case that being naked is immoral? Then it would be okay for God to punish them for being naked, right?
Using your example, yes.
Cool. If God was going to punish them for being naked after they ate the fruit, would it have been okay for God to punish them for being naked before they ate the fruit?
Would it have been okay? No.
Great. So before they ate the fruit, it would have been immoral for God to punish them for being naked. But once they learned right from wrong, after they ate the fruit, then it becomes moral for God to punish them for being naked. Correct?
Using that example, yes.
Awesome. You have now demonstrated that you understand that it would be wrong of God to punish them for being naked before they understood that it was wrong to be naked. So if they didn't understand that it was wrong to eat from that tree, how can God punish them for eating from the tree before they ate from the tree?
Punish them before they ate from the tree?
Right?
No.
See,
When Matt's
After.
right. Would it be moral for God to then punish them after they ate if they didn't know that the eating was a bad thing to do?
No, it would not be moral.
And yet that's what he did, right?
Yeah. And Marjorie, just to drive home the point, because earlier we came to the same impasse before, and you said, well, we don't have enough information. We don't really know whether or not they had the knowledge of good and evil. Genesis,
What I said was,
hold on, but
yeah.
Genesis 3:22 clearly says, and the Lord God said, the man has now become like one of us, knowing good and evil.
Mm-hmm.
Man
Right.
did not know, and now he does know. He must not be allowed to reach out his hand and also take from the tree of life and eat and live
Right.
forever. So before you eat the tree of
Mhm.
life, you don't have the gift of life, and afterwards you do. So the whole point of this is Adam and Eve committed a quote unquote sin when they were
Mhm.
ignorant of what even good and bad is. And then God punished them for it. Now, hopefully, all of us can agree punishing somebody like that in that type of situation is the same as punishing a 1-year-old for drawing on the wall.
Hello?
I'm here.
She's pondering.
Okay.
Oh,
I'm not.
Okay. So you're not thinking and you're not answering. Why don't we stick a pin in it here? You think about that stuff, and if you come up with something that could show us why we should believe in a God where there's a fanciful story where the only thing that we can agree on is that God was immoral.
You're not going to like what I say. So I'm not going to say it.
Well, it
'Cause
hasn't stopped you
I
so
don't
far.
want you to think
try us. Just let's go for it. Try us.
Huh?
I said
No,
try
you're
us.
going
Let's
to
just go
yell at
for it.
me. You're going
I
to yell
promise
at
I won't
me.
yell. I promise I won't yell.
Eric will almost never yell. I don't think I've ever heard Eric yell. I will mute my
Okay.
mic so that even if I yell at you, you won't.
Okay. Because I can't see your faces. So
Okay.
Adam and Eve were adults. They were not fully grown, like from baby, where they have all this knowledge, like
Marjorie.
Solomon and the other. Mhm.
Marjorie does
And
it, Marjorie, the
comparing
age,
it
here's
to
the thing.
1-year-old?
The age is irrelevant. The actual number of years a person's alive is irrelevant. In fact, Adam and Eve
Okay.
may literally been 1 year old because this
Exactly.
happened supposedly after creation. But here's the thing though. Doesn't matter if you're 1 year old baby without the knowledge of good and evil or 1,000 years old without the knowledge of good and evil. From a moral standpoint,
So
with the respect of punishment, it's the same.
the 1-year-old, if I tell a 1-year-old, don't write on the wall, they may not even understand that. If I tell an adult who just got finished naming all the animals, you know, pontificating about,
An
yeah.
adult without
that-
the
if
knowledge
that
of
is-
good and evil.
Yeah. See,
Okay,
Marjorie, you're getting hung
but
up on.
they were
Hang on, you're trying to,
told-
Marjorie.
No. Let's start with the
Marjorie's-
timeline. Somebody's born.
Yes.
At some point in the future, after they're born, they learn the difference between right and wrong.
Exactly.
If you punish them before that, it's immoral. And if you punish them
Right.
after that, it's not immoral.
Correct.
It doesn't matter if you've been alive for a day, a week, a year, a decade, a millennium. If you don't learn right and wrong until you actually grab the fruit and eat it, then you
Right.
can't be held responsible for eating it, because at the time that you ate it, you didn't know it was wrong, right?
Mr. Matt. Correct.
Okay. So it doesn't matter whether Adam was physically appearing as if he was an adult or not. When Adam ate the fruit, he did not know that it was wrong to eat the fruit.
Marjorie, let's pretend that I have the ability. Let's say there's alien life somewhere and there's like another civilization somewhere else out there. Let's say I had the ability to pluck one of those aliens off of his planet and put him onto a sidewalk in one of our cities in our world. He has no knowledge of our laws, no knowledge of what we consider to be right and wrong and moral. He immediately jaywalks. And then we immediately tackle him and throw him into prison and fine him $150 or jail. I'm sorry. Tackle him, throw him into jail, fine him $150. Is that good? Is that just? Is that moral and right?
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Sure. Go ahead.
Using your example.
Sure.
Did you tell him not to jaywalk?
Nope. Because he doesn't even have he doesn't even have the capability to process
Then yes,
what
that
is right and wrong under
immoral,
our moral system.
because there was no discussion, nothing was said.
Yeah.
If I take somebody
It is immoral.
If I take someone who doesn't know right from wrong and I tell them, don't touch my licorice,
Mm-hmm.
and they touch my licorice,
Mm-hmm.
is is it okay to punish them?
Does chastisement or rebuke follow in that? Is that included in your punishment? Or we only...
Wow.
It's okay to...
It's so strange watching you twist and turn to try to find
I'm not going to
any
ask
way.
the question.
Yes, I'm not an idiot. I've done this for decades. You are
I
trying to twist
understand
and
that.
turn. I'm trying to twist and turn
You
in order to
told them
avoid.
not to eat
Shut
your
up!
licorice. They ate it. I get it.
Shut up. Listen to me. Stop interrupting. The point I was making is, if they don't know right from wrong, what difference does it make if I tell them not to touch my licorice? They don't know that it's wrong to touch it, and they don't know if it's right to touch it. So your point about did he tell them not to eat it is completely irrelevant, because he could tell them all day long, don't do that, and they would not know that it was wrong to disobey.
Eve told the serpent, we may eat freely of every tree except this one. She understood.
No, that is not a statement of understanding right from wrong. That is a statement of, we were told not to do this. That doesn't mean that you know it's wrong, does it?
That's true.
And so if you didn't know it was wrong, which we've already fucking established about 10 times now, from both what the scripture actually says and from what you assumed and from what any reasonable person would assume, that if they didn't know it was wrong to be naked before and they knew it was after, that the tree eating that fruit gave them the knowledge of good and evil, which is why it's called the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. You don't have to fucking bend over and twist around. You can just look at it straightforward. Before they ate from that fruit, before they ate that fruit, they did not know right from wrong. And therefore, at the moment they ate the fruit, they did not know that they were doing something wrong. And if they didn't know they were doing something wrong, it doesn't matter if someone told them not to. They didn't know it was wrong.
I understand what you're saying. So you're saying that, yes, they may have heard the command, but the understanding of what that meant was not there.
Correct.
Correct? Okay. I understand.
So, for example, do you speak Spanish?
Very little.
So if I were to say, no comas esta fruta, do you know what that means?
I heard the word fruit.
Yeah. But was I telling you to eat the fruit or telling you not to eat the fruit? You don't know.
I think I heard it. I don't.
Yeah. And would it be wrong of me to hold someone who doesn't understand Spanish responsible for not doing what I said? No, you don't have
wrong.
to. Yeah.
It would be wrong.
And so this is why this Bible story, which we've read many times and spent time thinking about, and this is just the first one. In that story, the God character is immoral. And what's worse, the serpent tells the truth. The serpent that in the story is portrayed as the liar, the serpent did not lie. The serpent told the truth, because Eve says, in the day, we were told that in the day we eat of it, we shall surely die. And the serpent says, you will not die. For God knows that when you eat it, your eyes will be opened and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. And then she eats it. And what happens? She does not die. She does not die. And God says, behold, the man has become like us, knowing good and evil. So the serpent said, you're not going to die. You're going to be like God and know good and evil. They eat it and they don't die. And God himself says, behold, they are like us, knowing good and evil. So the serpent told the truth, right?
No, because then death came in.
No,
But the other
serpent
thing,
told the truth. The serpent told the truth.
People began to die.
That's not. Did God say, in the day you eat the fruit, a process of everyone dying will begin? No.
No, he didn't. Right.
What did he say? He said, in the day you eat it, you shall surely die,
You'll
right?
die.
Did they die that day? Did they die that
Nope.
day? And the serpent said, you will not die that day. You will become like gods, knowing good and evil. And what part of that what the serpent said, what part of that wasn't true?
You're not going to like my answer.
I'm sure I won't, because anybody reasonably paying attention would say the serpent did not lie, because the serpent did not lie. What did the serpent say that was a lie?
You shall not surely die.
Yeah. How is that a lie?
Because it's a clock that's ticking every day. We closer to it.
I give up. I'm done.
Please.
So Marjorie, just kind of wrap this up. We've been talking about this for 45 minutes.
Yes, you have, and I appreciate you. I really, really do.
Yeah, we appreciate you too, Marjorie. Thank you for the call. The thing we've been talking about in general, in apologetics, counter-apologetic circles, called the problem of evil, because Christians claim an omnibenevolent, omniscient, omnipotent God exists. And when we examine these other claims around this God, namely with the morality of punishing people who don't know any better, the fact that he even needed to have a system like this to begin with, and the fact that we have to sit here and argue about these things today because the Bible is insufficient to answer these questions that we're posing. When you couple all this together, this strongly indicates to us, via contradiction, if you want to go that far, that this God, this triomni God, doesn't exist, because there are inconsistencies with that claim and the claims the Bible are making. So this is the major hangup around this: is that an all-powerful God could have made the story better, or could have implemented a strategy that is better than putting two ignorant people in the middle of a garden with a cursed tree, basically. If he was all-knowing, he could have written a better story about it to help clear up these problems that we're having today talking about it. And if he was all-loving, he wouldn't punish descendants of these people or the people themselves because they were ignorant. Take any one of those, it directly contradicts the claims that Christians make about this God. Now, there's all kinds of solutions to the problem of evil. Just water down your God a little bit. Well, anyway, he wasn't all loving. He was just maximally loving. Or he wasn't all powerful. He was just maximally powerful. But he couldn't do some things. Like, there's all kinds of ways around that. But the Christians that claim that God is omni traits doesn't jive with this story and doesn't jive with our understanding of anything. And that's why we cling on to these things and talk about it, is because these refute the tri-omni Christian God.
And I appreciate all of those arguments that you give, because I have been, when I hear different people on your channel say those very things and other arguments like it, I'm like, God, what am I supposed to say? How do I, because I do want to engage in the conversation. I'm not dismissive of anyone. I'm like, God, what am I supposed to say? And if I may, for 5 seconds, I do have a word of the Lord for Matt.
Oh, yes, I promised we'd do that. I do want to say, though, how do you get this word of the Lord, and how do you know that it's for me?
So I saw you on a podcast, and you brought up some amazing arguments. And I went into prayer and I was like, Lord, how do I respond to that? I don't even know. And this is before I had even heard of this channel called The Line. And I saw you in a debate. Forgive me. I saw you in a debate. And I began praying for you because, you know, you revealed in this debate your background, how you were studying to become a preacher, how you were in the church for many, many years. And the thing that grabbed me from your discourse was that you had been asking God for evidence. You had been asking God for evidence. So I began praying for you. I said, Lord, I don't know what to say to him. I'm not dismissive of anyone. I welcome the discourse. I love, the conversation. And this is what, after days, this is what he replied to me, that your spirit, Mr. Matt, cried out over and over again to him for evidence. And when he sent it, you rejected it. And you thought it was things of, I guess, nature. And he said, I'm not apart from my creation. So when you experienced me, because you were wondering, am I experiencing him? Is this authentic? And then you said you had feelings similarly in other places. And the Lord says, I'm not apart from my creation. You will experience. I've given you unctions. I've given you impressions. And you were asking, is that me? Is that you? Is that you? And he's saying, yes, it was. And that's all I have.
Okay. That's a load of bullshit and garbage. No God.
Okay.
No God could possibly, that knows me, no God that knows me could possibly have said that to you. So your word of God is your own brain or some other thing that's deceptive, because it's absolutely not the case. And if you went and prayed and asked God what to say to me, and that's what God told you to say, God is fucking with you and trying to make you look bad, because you just came on a show to suggest that God gave you insight into my inner workings and how he kept presenting me with evidence, when the sort of things you're talking about are not sufficient evidence to warrant belief in a God and are not part of my story. So you're wrong.
Okay. Thank you for the time, guys.
But here's the thing. Now that I've told you that, do you still believe God told you that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you'd rather believe a being that you can't demonstrate as true, that seems to only interact with you, even after it provides false information, rather than the person, the real life person who just spent more time with you than any God has ever spent, trying to help you understand a fairly simple ethical problem. No God has ever spent 45 minutes with anyone, as far as we can tell. But I just spent that time desperately trying to help you. And every time I gave up, you're like, please don't, please don't. And so I stayed here. And then we get through all of that only for you to tell me what you think God wanted you to say. Why would God want you to say something that has such a negative effect and which I know to be false? Why would God do that?
I specifically asked about your statement. And your statement on the interview that I saw was,
my statement on the interview is irrelevant to the question I just asked you. Why would God ask you to tell me something that I know to be untrue?
you said, why would he? And I'm telling you what I asked him. And that was your statement.
How is what you asked him in any way an answer to my question of why would God tell you to tell me things that I know to be untrue?
Okay. It was a conversation. I asked a question, he answered. And that's
Wow. I completely understand that you asked a question and you think God answered. My question is, why was his answer something that I know to be a lie?
okay. And that's fine.
No, it's a
I'm not
fucking question, Marjorie. Why did God tell you to tell me something that I know to be untrue? You don't get to, that's a question. You don't just respond with, it's fine. Why
if you don't.
did God,
Mhm.
why did God tell you to tell me things that I know to be untrue live on a fucking show? Why is God punking you and embarrassing you by making you look ridiculous?
I'm not embarrassed.
I know you're not, but you should be. Why
I'm
is
not.
God telling you things that I know to tell me that I know to be untrue? Why would God do that? Put yourself in God's shoes and explain to me why he tells you to tell me something that I know is untrue.
Well, could it be? I can't speak for him in that regard why he would say it, but could it be that he wants you to revisit your relationship with him?
Goodbye, Marjorie. Okay.
I was wanting to bring it up, but I didn't want to drag the call on any longer. But Margie, I'll just go ahead and make this comment. And I can't read your mind, unlike some other what Christians claim. I can't read your mind. I don't know what your emotional state is, but I want you to ask yourself and honestly answer this in your private moments on your own. Ask yourself, if tomorrow you realize that Christianity was false and the Bible wasn't espousing truth, how would you feel? How would you feel in the moment? How would you feel next week, a year from now? What would be your entire outlook? And then hold on to that answer. Go back to the beginning of this call, rewatch the whole thing. And every time you evade a question, every time you don't answer us straight, every time we hit upon something that causes you some discomfort in the conversation, ask yourself, is that emotion that I predict myself having if Christianity was false, is that influencing my ability, hindering my ability to answer honestly and objectively here in this moment of the conversation? And I think if you can do that, like I said, do it on your own. You have to call back and tell us how you felt about it or anything like that. But
Don't
ask
call
yourself,
back and tell me.
how much is your need for this to be true influencing your ability to objectively analyze it? And maybe you'll come across and say, yeah, I don't see at all any conflict here. I, personally, like I said, I can't read your mind, but I am sensing it all over the place in this conversation, is that we're hitting barriers and we're hitting little red lines. Like, whoa, once I cross this line and say, hey, maybe God was immoral in punishing people who didn't know any better. Once I cross that line, oh no, now I'm in deep trouble. I fear what happens if I do that. Ask yourself, is that fear in you? Is that fear preventing you from answering it honestly? Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. I don't know. I can't read your mind. But ask yourself that, because we just had 50 minutes on that call. And we had ups and downs. And I think I appreciate the conversation overall. I was glad Marjorie called in. But I think that might be holding you back from really being honest with yourself about some of these things that we brought up.
It is
Just my 2
incredibly
cents.
painful to keep asking the same question over and over and over again and keep trying to come up with new analogies. It's good exercise. It forces us to try to come up with new ways of doing it. But even when I got analogies that were instantly obvious, it didn't translate. There's a roadblock that's put up there. And it's because religions in general, and Christianity in particular, is really good at putting up barriers to any sort of challenge. And I was waiting for the thou shalt not put the Lord thy God to the test. That's the next one. And it basically, in a way, Marjorie almost kind of started with that, because she's like, who are we to judge God governing, in his sovereignty? And then once we got past all that, it got down to, and then we needed the word of the Lord. It's so strange to me that here's something to think about. Eric, the Lord just gave me a word for you. And he says that he's tired of you masturbating to couch porn, like photographs of couches. That's reserved for JD Vance only. But he knows that every Tuesday you have been having a session while thinking about the couch. That's what God wanted me to tell you. I'm not judging. If Eric absolutely knows that that's not true, then I just demonstrated that everything I've said about the God I believe in is not true. It cannot be the case that I'm getting an actual message from a truthful God that knows Eric if the information I present isn't true. And nothing would if Eric was still on the fence and I told him that was the message from my God, Eric would be absolutely in his rights to completely dismiss my God. Well, there may be a God somewhere, but any God that says I jerk off on Tuesdays to pictures of couches, that's just not true. If there was a real God and it gave me that message, it would be trying to embarrass me. The fact that I'm too clueless to be embarrassed is not the issue. But we know that if your God, unless your God is also lying, or your God wants to make you look bad or whatever else, maybe God's, but that's the sort of thing. If I told Marjorie, look, I got a message from God and he told me that, you've been eating puppies. They're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats. And if God told me you're eating puppies and you're not eating puppies, then of course my conclusion is, hey, somebody just said couch hub and that's going to make me laugh. But it doesn't make sense that a God would give you false information to give to me live on a show.
Yeah. Besides, like, how would you, like, how do you even verify any of that? Like, this is not a reliable way of determining whether or not this God actually spoke to Marjorie. Like, if a God was really concerned about, in fact, Marjorie is still listening. Here's a challenge: if your God is really concerned with my salvation and the salvation of all the people watching this right now, and the thousands, tens of thousands more who will watch afterwards, and this is a new concept to me, so I was really interested in listening to it. Marjorie, have a word with the Lord about me and have him give me next week's lotto numbers. And if I win, I will donate every single dollar to a charity, a Christian charity, in the name of you and your God. I'll keep $1, frame it on my wall to remind me of this event, this miraculous event in my life. Like, that's a real test. That is something that would really move me. But no, Marjorie calling in and saying, well, I talked to God and I got these feelings that, hey, Matt, you were hurt, or Matt, you were stumbled by somebody in the congregation, or Matt, you had a sinful heart and you wanted, fame and popularity, or you just wanted to sin, or Eric, you wanted to fuck couches. Not denying that, but but like
there's some good looking couches out there.
Nice maroon leather, yeah. But no, like, this is not evidence. Anybody who believes something based off of that criteria, I'm sorry, is a moron. Like, how do you even come to that conclusion? Anyway, I'm sure Chris is going to say, oh, that's Eric's calling all Christians morons because that's what they do. But it's like that from my perspective, it's like, how is this even evidence? How do you even come to these type of miraculous, spectacular conclusions based on such a process?
I was going to take these calls in a different order. I was going to take these calls in a different order. There's only two left, but Kevin's been holding for a while and is a theist.
Yeah.
And because it ties into what we just said, Kevin has a question for me. And so, Kevin, ask your question and I'll try to answer it as succinctly as possible.
Okay. I've just stumbled onto this. The question is, you said you were a Christian, a Baptist faith. What event, what event or what experience did you have that you gave up on God and now don't believe that he exists or ever exists?
Yeah, I never had a bad experience or a problem or anything else. What happened was, myself and the people at my church thought that God wanted me to go into ministry, and I was terrified of it and disobeyed and went off and served in the Navy instead. And then at some point, I thought God was punishing me by taking away my job because I hadn't gone into the ministry. And so I surrendered and I said, okay, God, if you want me to do this, I'm ready. And I spent a year and a half in prayer and study looking for any way to demonstrate that God was real. And through that process, I found that all the reasons I had had before were fallacious and weren't good, and that everyone who could present arguments and evidence for the existence of God were presenting flawed arguments and evidence for the existence of God, and no God was responding to me or anybody else. And so while I was trying to be the best representative of Christ that I could be, it turns out I didn't have a good reason to believe, and I don't now. So nothing happened to me other than I figured out how to apply skepticism and evaluate evidence, and found that there wasn't sufficient evidence for God. That's it.
Okay, now on your evidence thing, I have to sort of copycat off of what your previous caller said. I think they shortened everything I wanted to talk about. You talk about evidence, and you're a strong believer in scientific evidence now versus the Bible, correct? The question
I'm
is...
sorry, I don't understand what you're saying, but yes, I value evidence.
Okay, now, since you say there's no evidence on the Bible, what evidence do you have?
I didn't say there's no evidence on
the...
I didn't say there's no evidence on the Bible. Are you saying that I don't accept the Bible as sufficient evidence? Because that's true.
Correct. Now, what evidence do you have that you support science as saying that everything is, the sun, I think, is 4.6 billion years old. The earth is millions of years old. What evidence do scientists have that proves a carbon dating or all their accusations or claims that their theories are all right and the Bible is wrong? When science also said, when I was in school, science said there were 9 planets. Science has changed their mind now, and there's only 8 planets. Hey, Pluto's not a planet all of a sudden. Yes.
Kevin, what was the 9th planet? What was the 9th planet?
Pluto.
Yeah. Is Pluto still there?
As far as I know.
Yeah, Pluto's still there. It just doesn't count as a planet because planet is a category that we use to define certain things. And so there's certain criteria, and as scientists refined criteria, it changed whether or not Pluto qualified as a planet, but it didn't change any of the facts about Pluto. It's still the same distance that from the sun that it always was. It is still the same measurable, identifiable body in the solar system. It just doesn't qualify for planet status because we learned more. Science wasn't proven wrong by a religious claim. The only thing that's ever clarified science is more science, and science demonstrates its truth. For example, if you want to know how we know the age of the earth, we have radiometric dating and a bunch of that stuff. If you want to know why carbon dating is reliable and that it's only reliable in the 10 to 50,000 year range or whatever else, you can go study the science for that. You can call into Skeptalk, you can talk to Forrest or any number of other scientists, but it seems like you just said, what evidence do you have, Matt, that science is always right and religion is always wrong, which is not something that I've claimed at all, but science is supported by evidence and is subject to peer review and is independently verifiable. It's not a top-down structure. It does not assert things are true. It says, here's our current best explanation that explains all of the available evidence the best, and we will revise this as soon as there's new information. Religion, on the other hand, in particular Christianity, makes proclamations that don't ever change. What the Bible says isn't changing. What people interpret from it change. But what the Bible says, it still says, not to plant different crops in the same field and all kinds of stuff. It says bats are birds when they're not. So at least we know that bats still exist and birds still exist. The Bible was just wrong about categorizing them because the people who wrote it didn't know any better.
But Adam got to name the species, not God.
Well, it doesn't. How weird. What did Adam? So I have a carpet python in the other room. What did Adam name that?
That didn't exist at that time.
You're saying carpet pythons didn't exist then? How do you know that?
How do you know they did?
Well, I'm not the one asserting that they
What's
did.
your
Okay.
evidence?
So name an animal that existed when Adam was around.
A bird. He called it a bird. He didn't call
So
it a turkey.
Adam called it a bird, right?
Correct.
How do you know that? Because I don't think Adam spoke English.
Well, I don't think he did either, but
You just said he called it a bird.
Well, he called it in his language, whatever that is. There's translations.
What was that?
You sort of beeped out there. Or did you shut me down?
No, I'm saying, what language did Adam speak?
I have no idea. Do you know?
I don't, because I don't think Adam existed. I don't think he spoke anything. What's your evidence that Adam existed?
The Bible.
Why would the Bible be sufficient evidence to determine that Adam existed?
Well, it's a writing that is written by numerous people, and it's been copied. It was hand copied back when it was written because they didn't have copy machines.
I'm aware.
I think this is where the human error comes in, where there's tweaks, there's changes in the Bible because it was translated across numerous languages.
Oh, so there's mistakes in the Bible?
Human errors, not.
I didn't ask where they came from. I don't think there are any errors other than human errors. You're the one that's into magic, not me. But you're saying there are errors in the Bible then, right?
I'm saying there's errors in anything that mankind has been involved in.
Why is it that I can ask you, are there errors in the Bible? And instead of saying yes, which we both know is the answer that you're doing, you want to twist and turn and dodge. Are there errors in the Bible, yes or no?
Yes. Now,
how do you know that the claim that Adam named the animals, how do you know that's not an error?
The Bible says that he named the animals.
I'm sorry, you've already said there are errors in the Bible. When the Bible says that Adam named the animals, how do you know that's not an error?
I don't know that's an error, and I don't think you know that's an error.
I don't. But you're the one claiming that it happened, and so I'm asking you, how do you know that's not an error? And now that we've finally gotten to the answer, so you're saying when the Bible says that Adam named the animals, that could be an error. Right?
If you want me to say yes, I'll say yes, but I have a question though.
Well, do you agree that the statement that Adam named the animals could be an error? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. If it's an error, how could we tell?
I don't quite understand the question because it happened 6,000 years ago.
Well, I think you do understand the question. How can you tell whether or not that statement, Adam named the animals, is true?
It says in a document that Adam named the animals.
We've already established that that document might be erroneous. How do we tell whether or not that document is erroneous?
You want evidence as to to disprove the Bible is what you're looking for.
No,
what's your evidence that science is accurate?
I'm asking you, how can we tell if a statement in the Bible is true?
Kevin, let me rephrase the question I'm trying to ask you. All right, if I have a coin and I take it to a coin specialist and I ask the specialist, coin specialist or whatever the title is this coin genuine or a fake? That coin expert is going to have a process to examine the coin and then tell me whether it's genuine or fake. Now, Kevin, I'm going to come to you and I'm going to hand you a Bible scripture. And I say, hey, Kevin, is this Bible scripture genuine or an error? Do you have a process to determine either of those? And if you do, what is it?
If I believe that there's a God and the scripture in the Bible was given by God, I am entitled to my belief that it is accurate. Now, over the time, if man has transposed it or changed it, I have no control over that, and God had no control over that.
So, Kevin,
at that point, because man can be evil. Man has the ability that you guys want to disprove the Bible, but your science theory, there's no evidence that science is 100% accurate.
Kevin, if I brought that coin, Kevin, if I brought that coin to an expert and they said, "Well,
yes,
I just believe it's real," would you trust that coin expert in his opinion about it?
He's an expert. Yes,
he's an expert.
I believe
he doesn't give you any he doesn't give you any reason to believe it's real. He just says, "I believe it's real. I just do."
At that point, I'd say, "Well, how much is this coin worth? Pay me. You can have the coin." Then you would call his bluff on whether it's real or not.
Kevin, yeah, okay. Then he says, "Yeah, it's real. It's worth $100." Like, Kevin, if you understand why, if you stop trying to sidestep and dodge that, you understand why you would find a new coin expert, or you wouldn't believe the coin expert, and why you wouldn't use him. You'll understand why we don't like your process of just, "Well, I just believe it's real because it's the word of God, and I read it there."
You're using the same thing in science, though. You're using the same thing in science because
I'm not even asking about science. I'm asking about your process. What is your process for determining whether a scripture is genuine or an error? And you haven't given us one yet.
Because it says it's
flipping
real.
A coin. Flipping a coin to determine it is better than your system. Go ahead. What?
It's to be the word of God, and God said that it is true.
How do you know that scripture is genuine?
How do we know if anything's genuine?
Answer the question, please.
You really have to make a conscious decision in your own mind. Each person is different. If it's real or it's not real. Correct?
Okay.
This is entirely circular.
Let's say you think it's real and I think it's not real. How do we tell which of us is right?
In our own opinions, if we don't have...
I didn't say about opinions. I'm asking which one of us is factually correct. Either you're right or I'm right. How do we tell?
Neither one of us is right, apparently, or we would agree.
No, that's not how fucking right works, Kevin. Do you think just because two people agree, they're right? Here, I have a certain number of cell phones on my desk right now. The number of cell phones on my desk now is either more than 2 or less than 2. If you think it's less than 2 and I think it's more than 2, only one of us can be correct, right?
Correct.
How would we tell which of us is correct in that scenario?
I can't see your desk, so I have to take the word of you.
That's not true. That's not true. I could actually turn the camera and point it down at my desk. But the way we could tell is to count the cell phones that are on my desk, right?
Correct.
And it doesn't matter whether we agree. The number of cell phones on my desk is the measure of how many cell phones are on my desk, right?
Correct.
So how do we tell which of us is right about the God in the Bible?
Do you have evidence that says it's incorrect?
I'm done with you, Kevin. You're dishonest.
I think you're dishonest because
I don't give a fuck what you think about me. I asked you a straightforward question, and instead of answering it and demonstrating that you had any mechanism to demonstrate that you were right, you just went down the, well, can you prove it's wrong? That's a fallacy. If I say I believe in Bigfoot and you can't prove there isn't a Bigfoot, does that mean I'm wrong?
You are entitled to a belief.
If I say that I believe in Bigfoot, if I say I believe in Bigfoot and you can't prove that Bigfoot doesn't exist, does that mean I'm wrong or I'm right?
You're entitled to your belief.
I'm sorry. I've asked the same question. I'll ask it again. If I believe in Bigfoot and you can't prove that Bigfoot isn't real, does that tell you whether I'm right or wrong? Yes. I mean, does it tell you?
Yes, you're right in your
Okay.
opinion.
No, you're an idiot. I give up. I can't. I didn't want to go there, but I don't give a fuck. It's not just an opinion. If I say I believe in Bigfoot, whether or not you can prove me wrong tells you nothing about whether or not I'm wrong. If you can't prove me wrong, I still might be wrong and I still might be right. You don't get to write it off as just an opinion and say that it's fucking right. There's either a God or there isn't, correct? Goodbye. All right.
He's gone.
Now the most patient person of all day.
Yeah, that was your stereotypical Christian circular argument right there. Like, okay, Bible is God's word. How do you know that? Well, the Bible says it's God's word. Well, how do you know? Why do you think that? Well, the Bible says it's God's word. Yeah, and a Prod Rebel, thank you so much, is a numismatist. That is a coin expert, but I prefer the more technical term coinologist. But thank you so much for that. Yeah.
All right. We have one final caller here, and this person's been on hold for 2.5 hours. So, B. Branjashide, thank you for the incredible patience. I'm going to apologize in advance. But we'll do what we can to help.
I understand y'all have had a tough night, and I hope that this call is enjoyable for y'all. So basically, I'm sorry, I'm a little nervous. I have written down, because I didn't want to waste y'all's time too much, the issue that I was having. I consider myself an atheist, but I had an experience that basically made me question my atheism, and I feel like I'm falling short as a skeptic, and I just want to know what y'all make of this. Okay. Do you mind if I read you my experience?
Go for it, but be ready to pause because we may need to interrupt for clarification or whatever.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. So first of all, I grew up as a Jehovah's Witness, which I actually just learned about Mr. Eric on this call for the first time, or this stream, and I appreciate that I'm going to have that point of view as well. So I started becoming a skeptic at age 15 and left as soon as I turned 18. I moved into my first rental place about 1.5 years ago. At this point, after a lot of research, I considered myself agnostic/atheist. I believe that every supernatural experience people had described had a logical explanation. Hallucinations, other things, making sounds, dreams, things like that. So I started having these things, Then I started having these things happen in my house. I started hearing a lot of very, very loud noises coming from my bathroom, and I'd hear the cabinet slamming shut, giant thuds on the wall. I tried to find whatever could be causing it. I was checking the water heater. I was looking outside at night to see if there were animals outside. I was even putting my ear up to the wall to see if it could be my neighbor, and it didn't end up being any of these things. But the noise, it started keeping me up, and I basically couldn't walk around anymore at night just because I was getting so scared, which made me feel so stupid as someone who considers herself an atheist. I'm like, this isn't real. This feels weird. But I had a friend keep insisting that she do a spiritual cleansing. And at the time I was like, I don't see the point of it. I mean, it's just going to fill my house with weird smelling smoke. But she insisted that it would make her feel a lot better if she could come do it. And I was like, well, no harm. If it makes you feel better, all right. So once she came and did that cleansing, everything stopped. All those noises, that bad feeling, and I've tried to keep my skeptic personality, and because I pride myself in questioning everything, and it's just in the back of my mind, and I was wondering if y'all ever had anything similar, or if there's ever something that made you, it just bothered you that you couldn't find a supposed logical explanation when you really, really tried. Is that a good way to put everything?
How much did you pay for the spiritual cleansing?
I didn't pay anything. Cool. She wanted to come do it because it would make her feel better. She was a friend of mine. I wouldn't pay for that.
What did she claim she was going to do?
So she walked around and she put salt on the floor. She sprinkled salt all over the floor, and she burned sage while doing a chant. And that's what she did.
Yeah, but okay. So she put salt on the floor and she chanted. Did anything happen while this was going on? Anything strange?
We were away from the house. She requested that we be away from the house. All things that made me skeptical, to say the least.
So you were hearing a bunch of weird noises that you couldn't track down. And without setting up a camera to see if the cabinets were moving at all, without putting a camera in the bathroom, anything. I mean, you may not have the ability or resources to do it, but without any investigation, you decide to leave the house and let someone else come in. And while you're not there, I don't even know how you know they did a chant or put any salt out because you weren't there. But while
That's
you're
true.
not there, they pour salt and do a chant. And then after that, no more phenomenon.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so there used to be potential evidence for something, and now there's no evidence for anything.
That's about right.
So what conclusion can we draw?
I'm genuinely not sure. I'm sorry.
Me neither. I don't know any conclusion that can be drawn from this other than something was happening and it stopped happening. You can't show a causal connection. You can't show what was happening. So I don't know what conclusion could possibly be reached from this.
B.
That's completely fair.
B, I'm not sure if you're familiar, like you're a fellow XJW like me. So I have if I can shamelessly plug my channel, I have a video over on my channel. It's about 45 minutes long, and the title is "Are Demons Out to
As
Get
soon as
You?"
I heard about you, I tried to find your channel.
Okay, it's Skeptics and Scoundrels. It's just do a Google search on that, and you can find it.
It should be in the description of the video.
That too.
All right, got it written down. Perfect.
I have a video on my channel from about a year ago. It's called "Are Demons Out to Get You?" And it's a deep dive in a 1976-77 Awake article that the Witnesses published, 50 years ago, about a guy named Ralph Anderson. And it was his anecdotal testimony about how he was tormented by demons his entire life until he became a Jehovah's Witness. And then after he became a Jehovah's Witness, it didn't cure the demon hauntings, but it reduced them to the point where it was tolerable. And anyway, I analyzed that. Those are his claims, rather, not necessarily that they actually happened, but the whole video goes into all of the explanations that can account for the things he experienced and very closely related for the things that you're experiencing. Because we can think that we are analyzing every single natural possibility without actually doing that. And the whole adage of, if you eliminate all possibilities except one, that last one, no matter how improbable, must be the truth. Sure, on paper it sounds great, but in reality, we as humans can't do that. I can't. If I experience a hallucination tonight, I'm not going to be able to eliminate all natural possibilities. And then even after that, make the logical jump to supernatural. Yeah. Here's an example.
It's not really possible that we know the exact number of possibilities. I see what you're saying.
Yeah. So, as Matt said earlier, the best thing to do in that situation is to say, I don't know what's causing this, or I don't know what stopped it. It doesn't give you justification to start reaching towards things like the supernatural or even the super duper natural until those things are established to be possible explanations.
That phrase made me laugh. That's the first time I've ever heard that one today. Super duper natural.
I got that off of a online friend named B.S. Lewis. He coined that, and I was like, I'm stealing that. Thank you so much. But anyway, but one of the examples in the video that I mentioned, this was an anecdote from me. This was something I heard that somebody directly gave to me as evidence. There was a housewife. She was a fellow witness 30 years ago. or so. She and her family lived down the road in a house from my house. And she was home alone one day and she was cleaning. And as she was cleaning, she noticed one of her vases on her shelf was turned about 180 degrees. It was basically backwards. And she was like, oh, that's weird. So she rotated the vase back into place and went back to cleaning. An hour later, she came back and that vase was re-rotated 180 degrees back into its original position. She knew she was the only one that was home. She knew nobody else had entered or left the house. And this freaked her out. She fled the house. She called her husband, demons, there's demons in the house. You know, as witnesses, you know, they have really weird ideas about these things. You know, if you buy a book at a garage sale, it might have been in a demon infested home, and that's the demon's gateway into your home. Like, they have some bizarre beliefs about that.
My mom made me get rid of some of my old Nintendo consoles because she thought they came from a house that practiced rituals.
Yes, that same thing happened to me. Very, very similar. But anyway, they actually did discover what the reason for the rotating vase was. And this was after a thorough examination by the wife. And I think the husband eventually came home and he looked a little bit further, and they resolved the issue. She was listening to music on a sound system, and the subwoofer was causing vibrations, which caused the vase to rotate in place. Gradually, very slowly, almost imperceptible to the eye, but over an hour, those rotations add up, and now the vase is fully rotated. And then to back up this explanation, I actually posted a video of a museum that had something similar caught on camera. It was an old idol, I think it was like an Egyptian idol or something, on a glass case, and the camera in real time showing it rotate. And if you look really closely, you can see that it only rotates whenever there's human activity nearby, like walking, doors opening, closing. That was an explanation that did not even cross the wife's mind. And then she was crying demons as the explanation. And then somebody a bit calmer came by and said, hey, we found the real explanation. So there might be something that's completely out of your ability to perceive right now because you don't have enough evidence. There's possibilities you aren't considering. It could just be as simple, from what you told me, my thing is probably just a simple matter of priming. Once you start getting spooky vibes at a place, like, you might start experiencing things, seeing movement.
And
like this happens all the time. Like,
it wasn't. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. I was going to wrap it up and say, like, you can go to like Long Beach, California, and go visit the Queen Anne. It's a supposedly spooky haunted ship, and lots of people go in there primed to believe that they're going to experience something, and lots of people go in there believe something. Like, this can be just a case of priming, where you are getting freaked out by perhaps hallucinations or your mind playing tricks on you or whatever. You get somebody in there to supposedly fix the problem, and now your brain's like, okay, maybe the problem's fixed now, I'm going to go in and try again. There's subtle changes in the way you're perceiving things based on what you've done to, you know, all that kind of stuff. And none of this can be discounted. And it certainly doesn't give the license to jump to the supernatural on this. Anyway, go ahead and what you're about to say there.
Well, first I was saying, I wish I had taken Mr. Matt's idea. That would have been, I don't know why I didn't just put a damn camera in there. It would have made things so much easier. I could have saved myself a lot of stress. But yeah, it was, I think I may have even read the exact article of the video that you were talking about with my mom. She used to read things like to an absolutely absurd degree. So I'm really looking forward to watching that. And I'm glad I was able to get a link to your channel.
All right, hope you enjoy it.
I do feel a little better, just because, like, this is the first time, because I'm sure, I know it says my location, I live in Louisiana, very big in a very big red state. We are, well, I'm pretty sure it's a red state, majority red. So if I tell someone something like that, I'm talking about it, the first thing that they're going to say is, it's a demon. It's a demon. You got a demon. So this is one of the first times that I've talked to someone about it, and they've said this doesn't necessarily equate to something supernatural. And that feels so good to hear. You know what I mean?
Tell you, if people were going to tell you it's a demon, it'd be kind of interesting, because some of them would be like, oh, you need to do a spiritual cleansing with salt and chanting. And somebody else would be like, you need a priest to come in and, you know, pray the rosary or whatever and do this, or you need this, or you need this. They all think there's something, and yet they would probably have different potential solutions to it. And
Very true.
let's imagine your person came in and they did your spiritual cleansing, which you never saw and don't know anything about. And all you know is that after they did that, you stopped experiencing whatever the phenomenon was that we still don't know. What if in a month or so, you start hearing the noise again? Is that going to mean that the spiritual cleansing didn't work? Or does it mean you need to get them back to do a spiritual cleansing again?
I suppose if I were to assume either of those things, I would first have to be able to prove to myself that it was a spiritual cleansing that did that in the first place. So I'm not sure what I would think in that situation exactly.
Yeah,
Does that
that's
answer
what I
make
mean.
sense?
Yeah, it's like you had some experience, you don't know what it is, you didn't have a real way to investigate it. And then it's like, so there's a fallacy called post hoc ergo propter hoc, which means after this, therefore because of this. And so that's kind of what we're doing when we say, there was something weird happening, we don't know what it was, but it stopped, and it stopped after this. Well, it also stopped after you had breakfast that day. It also stopped.
Is that kind of like a correlation versus causation?
Yeah. After this, therefore because this
Okay.
means that because there's a correlation with these things doesn't mean that there's a causal link.
Yeah. No,
And,
I understand. I
finally-
understand what you're saying.
Finally, B, I think maybe another thing you want to consider too is we have lots of like stories like this from conflicting religions. We'll have Jehovah's Witnesses saying, demon possession that I prayed and it's gone. Like in the case of the video that I mentioned, you'll have Muslims say the same thing. You'll have all kinds of, pagans and all kinds of conflicting religions with their different solutions, and those solutions solve the issue. What you can ask yourself is, all right, this religion over here, I'm fairly convinced is false. Like what they say, like for instance, Mormonism, you can probably latch onto that. Ask yourself, why did the Mormon experience relief at that when you know to a reasonable degree of certainty that their religion is false? What other explanations could there be that explain it rather than the supernatural? They can ask yourself, well, how do those explanations perhaps explain my phenomenon, my experience? And that might help you to open it up. It's called the outsider test of faith. You just swap out the explanation for something that you don't necessarily agree with. Keep the story entirely the same. Instead of salts on the floor, they prayed to Allah. Or instead of salt on the floor, they measured your thetans and they cleansed your blood of thetans, and now you don't feel the things anymore. Ask yourself, why don't you believe those explanations when other people claim that? And then apply that to your situation and ask, okay, perhaps I'm falling into the same pitfalls that those people over there who believe their experiences are evidence of devils and demons and Satan and stuff like that. How does that apply to me? You may give you some different perspective on it. Like, kind of take you out of the equation and get the emotions and the spookiness out of it, and start thinking about it in terms of other people and their claims and their explanations.
I think I might have fell into the same trap that a lot of those people do, which is once I find some sort of solution and I notice any sort of change, I stick with that one as it was the first one that I ever saw. And I never refused to listen to any more, but it certainly lowered my my feelings of like opening up to many new possibilities because I had supposedly seen something like this work. So I think that's also probably a big part of how it works for a lot of people is the first thing they see work and they shut off any other possibility because they know they've seen this. And personal testimonies are difficult, if not impossible, to completely debunk because this person can always say, well, I did see this.
Yeah. The person giving the testimony might be personally like it could have potentially happened to that person. Like what the person's saying and the things he's attributing it to could probably all be accurate. And that makes that person personally justified in the belief, but that can never be used for your justification in that person's claims or mine or Matt's. So, we need stronger stuff in order to use that as a reason to believe some other, experience. Is there
it's not always easy.
Yeah, it can be frustrating.
No, it's not.
limitations of honesty.
I'm 20 years old and I just left at 18, so I still have a lot of deconstruction to do. I'm sure you remember what it was like. I don't know how long ago you left the Jehovah's Witnesses, but it's a slow process.
I'm envious. I left when I was 26, 27. I missed out on a lot of my youth because of that. I'm 42 now, so it's in my 15 years. But no, it sounds like you're on the right path. You're asking the right questions. You're being skeptical. You're doubting. You're stopping yourself and saying, "Hey, wait, hold on. I'm getting, lost in this, or I have questions about this." You're seeking other people and their opinions. You're doing great, man. All the power to you. Keep going. And yeah, feel free to call in again and let us know kind of your conclusions on that is, or if you want to talk about something else. We can always commiserate over our JW upbringings and all that. So yeah, thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Oh yeah, no problem. Is there more time we have on the call? Because I'd love to talk about some JW stuff.
Unfortunately,
Yeah.
Arden and I worked a Reptile
That's
Expo
no
all
problem.
weekend, and we've now been going for 4.5 hours, I think. And I'm pretty sure
Completely
she'll kill me
understand.
if I don't end this one right about now. But we do appreciate it, B, and wish you good luck.
Tell you what,
All
B,
right,
though.
no problem. Thank y'all so much for taking it.
Yeah, thank you. And we'll go ahead and let you go. Feel free to email me and give me a topic or two about what you might want to talk about. Because I do streams every once in a while on my channel, and I also do some streams on other XJW channels. So if you, when we can keep your face hidden, if you're still trying to like fade and stay protected against like shunning and disfellowshipping. Okay, cool.
Everybody knows me as an out apostate.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, if you have no fears about that, then I'll be glad to have you on my stream, or you and I can maybe go on some other XJW stream and we can chill out and talk and just have a good time about it.
Absolutely. Can I find your email on your YouTube channel?
Yeah, skepticsandscoundrels@gmail.com.
skepticsandscoundrels@gmail.com. Alrighty. I don't want to take
Alright.
too much more of y'all's time because I'm tired from the Reptile Expo. But
No worries.
thank y'all so much for taking my call, and I thoroughly enjoyed the rest of the stream. I didn't mind waiting.
Hey, thanks, B. That was incredible patience on your part.
2.5 hour wait on B's part. Good job.
Yeah. 2.5 hour wait on it. Is it? Oh, it's 3 hours. So no, it's 7. So it's 3 hours, 3.5 hours, not 4.5 hours. So I guess
still a long
technically
time.
we could do another hour, and Arden couldn't possibly get mad because she didn't balk when I said 4.5 hours. I did though just get to ban Ray Pellerin in chat. And I loved Arden's comment because the person was basically just kind of offhand being transphobic with a question and then decided to lie and say that they didn't ask a question. I'm like, I literally screenshot your question, so why are you lying? And then they're like, oh, I was distracted. I was watching a baseball game and I heard something and thought I'd say this. And so Arden just typed in, you're watching baseball and not paying attention, but you paid enough attention to ask that question? Get the fuck out of here. And that is absolutely the right thing.
I was immediately I was doubting what I just said. I said, oh, did I mix up the husband and wife in the story? And maybe I said the wife's wife or what. I was immediately like thinking, okay, what did I do wrong? But yeah, I'm probably just a transphobe. Yep.
Yeah, it's just wild as stuff. So that's it for the Sunday show after dark. Huge thank you to everybody who tuned in and who called, including the ones that I was, the least patient with. It's still, there's good points and good frustration. And it helps us kind of fine tune and hone. I learned stuff from Eric. I learned stuff from everybody that I end up working with. Thanks to our call screeners and producers that are there scrolling up the screen, and to all of our moderators and everybody in chat. We will see you starting tomorrow with Skeptalk.